All right, looks like we're all here. Let us begin our Oscoda Township regular board meeting for June 22nd of 2020. Roll call, please.
Ms. Mcguire.
Here.
Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Baier.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Gorsky.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. All right, first on the agenda is a public hearing for the ECWAG grant application. I make a motion, we go into the public hearing for the ECWAG grant application.
Support.
Who was that?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire.
Yes.
Mr. Gorsky.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, we are now in the public hearing.
All right, so the public hearing is associated with the ECWAG, and ECWAG stands for Emergency and Imminent Community Water Assistance Grant. And this is through the U.S. Department of Agricultural Rural Development, and it is for water system improvements. There is a resolution later on in the agenda associated with 2020-13. And it states that Oscoda Township recognizes the need to make improvements to its existing water distribution system due to PFAS contamination. The Charter Township of Oscoda authorized Rowe Professional Services Company to prepare an application engineering report, which recommends the construction of phases A, B, C, and G of the water main extension with an estimated cost of $2 million.
Okay, does any board members have any comments regarding this? All right. I have everyone unmuted. Does anybody attending the meeting have any comments related to the ECWAG grant?
Would you like to have me give a little bit more in-depth summary, or?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. As Mr. Schaefer said, the purpose of this project, this will be the third. So far, the township has had 2 successful application processes for ECWAG. This will be the third. As he stated, the purpose of this project is to extend public water supply system to the residents served by private wells, where the groundwater has been impacted by PFAS contamination. Schedule-wise, based on the application process and such, we would anticipate the project to be constructed within 1 year once the application is approved. And again, that kind of is all dependent on how quickly USDA-RD will get through the initial process. Let the township know if they're successful in the application process, and then there will be some upfront work with USDA to get the project moving, and then design and survey of this area to get this taken care of. One thing that we are in good shape on is just that, the survey and design. Because this was, if the board and the township residents remember, this was the same phases that we attempted to get the CBDG-IR grant back in January, February timeframe, and we were able to get some of the design going on it at that time based on board authorization. for that application process. So once we get USDA approval, which we hope we would get in short order, we should be able to turn the design around where it is potentially feasible that we would get bids out yet this year, later in the fall, and have construction being able to start up similar to phase 2 this year in the April timeframe, depending on what type of spring we have next year. The project will include approximately 2 miles of water main between the phases, maybe 2.5 miles, and potentially serve up to 100 residences. That number is still somewhat vague until we get out there and actually do a hard count, but we're anticipating somewhere in the vicinity of 100 services or 100 residents being served by this main. The project impacts, similar to the past ones, will have limited impact to the public right-of-way. There are areas where the water main will be installed adjacent to wetlands. However, impacts are not anticipated, and all required permits through Eagle will be secured prior to construction, and the project is not anticipated to have any environmental impacts. When we do have a completed environmental study completed by RCAP, Lisa Faut, and that will be included in the application to move it along. As we move through the project, we will be, just like before, working with the Township Board on the budget, making sure that we stay within the limits of the grant. Right now, there's no firm commitment through ECWAG on what the funding limit is going to be. We anticipate it being either $1 million or up to $2 million as far as the application. And as we work through with them, we will find out more on those details and provide that information to the board. Similar to before, the water service lines on private property will not be eligible for this project financing. So the township will continue, as they have been, looking for other sources of funding to secure those water service lines on private property for the hookup. We are targeting the submit of all of the draft paperwork through their electronic system, RD Apply, by July 1st, 2020. That completes my summary.
All right. Any comments from the board or members of the audience regarding the ECWAG grant?
Rick, you mentioned wetlands. Law Drive's pretty high and dry. Where's the wetlands you're considering?
There's possibly, we might, over on phase G, over there by the schools, up in there are potentially maybe some wetlands we might get close to. We don't anticipate it, and we haven't done a thorough evaluation, but that's the one area where there are some lowlands, and just depending on the size of the acreage determines whether or not it's a wetland or not. But again, we don't anticipate having to get near them, but we just have to still identify them in the application process.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, any other comments from everybody? You can also make comments in the chat if you don't want to speak.
Documentation for this application will be available at the Township Hall, and then any other means that the Township chooses for any public review or comment for the month of July, essentially. So.
right, hearing no other comments, I need a motion to come out of the public hearing.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there
Support.
support? Motion by Mr. Gajewski, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. For the next public hearing, I make a motion we go into the public hearing for the DWRF grant application.
I'm just gonna turn it right over to Rick. He's got this all detailed out as well.
Is there support for the motion?
I'll support the motion.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. We're now in the public hearing.
Okay, the summary on this, a little bit more detailed as far as this application goes. This is, as Mr. Weed stated, this is the Drinking Water Revolving Fund that is administered through Eagle. These are reviewed, these types of applications are reviewed on an annual basis, and they look for, obviously, the need of the project, the need from the town, from the local municipality, in this case, the township, as far as the impact to the local residents and businesses, and look for also which Oscoda Township did qualify for disadvantaged township status, which improves the score through the process. It also does put you into a category. There is up to $25 million in this program each year that is set aside for, I'll say, 100% funding. So again, if we score high enough and the need is shown through the application, there is a potential here for the township to secure upwards of $5 to $6 million as far as in grants to complete this project. If for some reason the township isn't successful in that, the project would be broken down into 5 phases over the next 5 years. And again, working with the township, the Eagle will close on each of the phases as the township sees fit. If at any time the township chooses that it's not in their best interest to go with the traditional program, which is a 30-year loan or other principal forgiveness or whatever, you have that right of refusal prior to closing to protect your investment, protect your funds, and that instead of going into a loan program. But the project, like I said, this application we will be submitting for all remaining phases A through H, which is approximately 3,500 feet of new water main and upwards of 350 to 360 new service connections. Now, under this program, and we can thank the communities to the south, where galvanized and lead service lines became an issue over the last several years, EPA has, and the State Treasury Department has confirmed that the water services lines for Oscoda Charter Township would be eligible for the financing and the potential grant. So if we're successful here and the township decides to move forward, this project would include all of the mains and all of the water services. Total estimated cost is somewhere around $9 million, but that is all of the construction engineering, design engineering, all of the township administrative costs, legal costs, and all that stuff, which will be higher for this type of project and application or successful application than the ECWAG. And again, I'll repeat that at any time that it's not in the best interest for the township to move forward, you have the option to back out of the program. So, but again, the draft DWRF has been available at the township hall over the last 30 days. It's been made, I think, made as far as a link through the website for public review and comment. That will still be available for the public to review and comment up until June 30th, because July 1st is the deadline for us submitting this application. So we will take any comments that come out of tonight's meeting and anything else that comes up between now and June 30th, incorporate it into the application, as far as, you know, how it was considered and how the questions or comments were resolved. And then, like I said, the application will be submitted July 1st. Schedule, we would anticipate hearing from Eagle a decision on this and the grant portion of this somewhere in early third quarter of 2020, with the intent that if the township chooses to move forward, that we would close on the financing or grant of the project in March of 2021, and that construction then would start shortly thereafter. And again, if we're awarded the entire package and it's beneficial to the township, then we would move forward. Realistically, to do all of these projects, it would still probably stretch over 3 years at least to complete them. But it would be essentially a continuous process on construction, and the only thing that would shut us down each year would be the winter months. So that's the summary for the DWRF application.
All right, guess I was muted there. Do we have any comments from the board? Are there any comments from the public regarding the DWRF grant?
This is Kathy Woosterbarth. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'd like to ask, actually, I would like for either you, Aaron, or Bill to comment on the advantages regarding, you know, the PFAS issues that we have in this grant. It's advisable to do that.
The advantages. You mean as far as expanding for the water main?
Right.
Ro, do you have the numbers associated with that?
As far as again, the advantage of this program is that the funding source is large enough to take on all of the remaining phases. As I said, the anticipated costs associated with construction and everything is in the vicinity of $9 million. With the fact that this could be packaged all together and economy to scale, we would anticipate the bid prices to come in significantly lower, because basically this would lock up a contractor, as I said, with a pretty substantial amount of work for upwards of 3 years. So again, all advantages to the township as far as finally getting to a point where you've constructed the water mains in the currently identified plume of the PFAS contamination that the DEQ or Eagle has been monitoring for several years. So it would basically take care of all of the problem areas that have been identified up to this point.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments from the public regarding DWRF grant? Okay, hearing no further comments, need a motion to come out of public hearing.
So
I move that we come out of public hearing.
support.
Motion by Mr. Baier, support by Ms. Mcguire. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire. Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Baier?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. For the next public hearing, I make a motion we go into the public hearing for the CWSRF application.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Baier?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed.
Okay, the summary for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. The purpose of this project, or this project plan and application, is to rehabilitate aged and the failing sanitary sewer pumping system infrastructure for the township. This is a kind of a continuing extension of the SAW grant that you undertook a few years ago that studied the system, identified potential areas of improvements, developed a capital improvement plan, a 5-year capital improvement plan, and a 20-year capital improvement plan for planning purposes for the township. This application includes projects for state SCADA installation and upgrades to the electrical system at 19 of the township's pump stations. I'm sorry, that's the SCADA. SCADA will be installed at the 19 stations, electrical and control upgrades at 9 stations, rehabilitation of 7 stations, and replacement of 3 total stations. Also, this project will include the installation of the grate and screening that is necessary out at the lagoon system that will greatly improve the maintenance that F&V has to go through on a regular basis. These grates will basically screen out most of the large debris and intermediate debris that comes through the system and has a tendency to plug up the equipment out at the lagoon system and such. So it'll help greatly with that. This project, if successful in the funding application, is anticipated to take 1 to 2 years to complete. A lot of that time frame is once we get in, start truly evaluating each of the components of the application at each of the stations, and then the contractor starts ordering equipment and pumps and electrical controls. There can be a fair amount of lead time on that equipment, once it's ordered, once it gets in, and then once it's able to be installed. But again, we will want to get on that process right away after the township hears whether or not they're successful on the funding application. Each of these projects, the DWRF and this one, we had to look at different alternatives just so that Eagle knows that we're not just focusing in on one alternative. So we had to look at, do nothing and what the impact is to that. So that's basically allowing the system to continue the way it is and have to undergo the tremendous amount of maintenance and individual replacement of parts and pumps and such, which is not economical from a system standpoint. We looked at just the SCADA electrical and control upgrades only. Again, those will significantly improve the system, but the pump stations that need rehabilitation and or total replacement would not see really any improvement from the SCADA and electrical upgrades. So that alternative was looked at, and then going through and replacing everything throughout the system, which isn't feasible from a dollar standpoint, and because you went through the SAW program, it's not warranted. You still have a lot of the equipment out there, a lot of the force main, a lot of the station components that are still functioning and will work fine into the future with these improvements. So again, we went through the process, coordinated our activities with the SAW. We've sat down with Doug Moen and Catherine Wynn at F&V to make sure that we were all on the same page, and we will continue that effort through the design and construction of this upon successful submittal and approval of the application. The total estimated costs of these projects, including engineering, design engineering, construction engineering, and the cost of the components and stuff, is roughly $5.3 million. This project application is due 1 month later. This one is not due to Eagle until August 1st. So we got a little bit more time to get public comment, because this report was just made available within the last week. It will be kept open for review comments pretty much through the month of July, and then we will finalize the application and submit that on August 1st. The the decision schedule is even though this goes in a month later, the decision schedule is a little quicker, or it's the same decision schedule. Township will receive information back on their application the third quarter. And then with the idea that we would be, if successful, we'd be closing on the project financing in March with construction of these components, ordering of the equipment, and then construction of these components taking place in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Obviously, if we can accelerate that schedule and get things done sooner, that again will be to the benefit of the township and probably the construction bid. We will do so, but we wanted to be realistic in the schedule based on equipment and procurement of that process. So, so that's the clean water SRF. One of the reasons they're able to expedite the decision on this, even though the application goes in a month later, we had a lot of discussion and a lot of input with Eagle in putting actually both of these project plans together, both DWRF and this one, but more so maybe even on this one, because this is dealing with an existing system and not the DWRF, which is dealing with a proposed expansion. So there was a lot of back and forth information shared with Eric Pocan at Eagle, with the understanding that that helps in their review and analysis of the project. Township was also identified as being a disadvantaged enterprise for this project, which again helps you in your scoring and your financing of this project also. So that completes my summary for this CWSRF application.
Okay, any comments from the board? All right, are there any comments from the public regarding the CWSRF grant? All right, hearing no further comments, I need a motion to come out of public hearing.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. Mcguire. Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed.
Well, I appreciate the time tonight to go over this with you. We will continue, obviously, between now and the application deadlines to work with you and the township staff to finalize these, and then we will continue to keep you apprised of the process and make sure that we provide you recommendations that are in the best interest of the township.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, for agenda additions, we have 2 items for other number 11 and other number 12. For number 11, the resignation of Elizabeth Swales from the Board of Review. And for other number 12 is row component of the USDA distribution. Are there any other agenda additions? Right, is there a motion for the agenda?
I move we
I
have
moved it.
the agenda with the 2 additions.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Baier. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passed. For the consent agenda, any comments regarding the minutes for June 8th?
Just one comment on that in the call to order. It's listed there as Robert Parks Library when it was a Zoom meeting, actually.
Very good. I appreciate you catching that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll make the change.
Old habits, I guess, John.
Yeah, wishful thinking, I suppose.
Yeah.
Any comments regarding payment of bills for $323,160.05?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First one is this on page 9 of our packet. It's a refund for the deposit at the Warrior Pavilion for $250. This was from June of 2017. And then there's a payment under the superintendent, Mr. Robert Stalker, for meals at the MME conference. I don't know when that was for, but obviously Mr. Stalker's not been here for a couple of years. And then down farther under zoning and planning, Josh Sutton, check for MTA conference from December of 2015. And I guess my question is, why are these so late and outstanding without some sort of follow-up to know why we have these checks outstanding? And then I guess that next logical question would be, how many other checks do we have outstanding that we are not clear on what balances would be in various funds?
As Cindy outlined in the audit presentation last week, she spoke to this, and it's actually part of the board's letter from the auditor in part of the escheats process that she wanted us to go through. Some of the checks I was not in charge of the accounts payable at the time. So we are just following out the direction from the auditors to fulfill the escheats process, do our due diligence in trying to reach out to these people to reissue the checks if possible, or to void them, or to turn them over to the state. So it was outlined by the auditor at the last meeting.
So who would have been responsible for these then?
I was not we did not write the checks in the treasurer's office here. I had to go back out to the hospital and pull the old documents to make sure that they were supposed to be reimbursed to these people, contact the people, which I have, and they've returned letters to me, and Some of the ones I don't have to report. Some of the ones over a certain amount of money you do have to report or reissue, and that's what I've done because I'm dealing with it now.
Well, it just seems to me there's an awful lot of time's gone by with these just sort of hanging out there.
Yep. But now it's taken care of.
So there won't be any more of these outstanding checks coming through later on that have been for multiple years in
For
the past?
the sheets process, no.
Well, for any process.
Well, I guess it depends on if people turn their bills in to get to us to get payment. We still have an outstanding bill that I emailed you on. I'm sure you read it, Bill, in regards to waste management that we haven't been able to pay that bill. It was back from February because we're still negotiating contract or something. And we've sent several emails to the superintendent to look to see when we could pay that bill. So some of those things are not necessarily under the treasurer's compass.
Well, I guess if the payment of bills and the follow-up on those payments isn't under the treasurer, then I don't know who they'd be under.
Well, again, like I've said in the past, if they don't get the bills turned in and don't get them coded, I can't pay them. This is a totally different instance than that. The sheets process is a totally different thing, and it's been addressed.
Okay. There was only one other question. I think I know the answer to this. It was on page 12 of the packet. It's a payment to Clean Air in regard to the Michigan Mod project for $10,000. And if memory serves, they had contributed $10,000 toward that project, and we weren't able to obtain that. So I guess we're just refunding that money. Is that correct?
Yeah, we tried several different avenues with Mishta. We tried to go over their head and were unsuccessful. We cannot build the modular units on the township-owned property on the base. Therefore, we're not moving forward with it. And based on the 2019 financials, the auditors actually moved it to a payable. That's why you see it coming out of a payable. So it's already been accounted for in 2019. This is actually just the issuance of that $10,000 refund.
Okay, and I guess I did have one follow-up question to the payment of bills. I had expressed a concern back in April about a payment to F&V that was due for January, and we did not pay that bill until April. And I received a couple of emails from Ms. Mcguire, but not really an explanation of what actually happened there. And one of the emails that I found interesting was that the invoice was sent directly, to 3 different people. One directly to the treasurer's office, being Jane, the deputy treasurer, and also Tammy and Dave. And my understanding in talking to Tammy is it was coded that same day and walked over to the treasurer's office. So I haven't really gotten a good explanation of why a contract payment that we make, it's the same amount every month, it's a responsibility of our contract with F&V, that would be delayed from January to April. I hope I haven't been muted this whole time.
No, I've heard you.
Okay.
Okay, is there any comments? Okay, Mr. Palmer, you asked a question or statement. What did you get? What you needed from that?
Well, I had posed this question back in April, and Ms. Mcguire was going to get back with me, and she did send me a series of emails, but not really an answer to why the bill didn't get paid in January. And one of the emails was the very first one and I found interesting, was that the invoice was sent directly to the treasurer's office. So it seems like they would have, I know it has to be coded, but they do get, that email was sent directly to them along with the executive secretary and Mr. Schaefer. So, and my understanding is that the executive secretary coded it that day and walked it over to the treasurer's office. And so I guess my question is, I mean, if they just failed to make the payment on time, then I guess that's an answer. If it was an oversight on the treasurer's part, then that's an answer. But I never really received that in the email. It was stated in the email that there was an oversight, but it wasn't stated an oversight by whom. So I guess the bill's been paid, and I guess it's just F&V does a very good job for us administering our sewer and water, and we have a contract, and not only F&V but other contracts we have. And I think when we have a contract and we set a payment, we should make those payments in a timely manner. So I was just curious why that didn't happen in this one case. But
Okay, not hearing anything else. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire?
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. Subcommittee reports and project updates. First one we have is for Row. There you go.
Okay, Phase 2 water main project. Project is actually an update today. The project is essentially complete. There are a few cleanup items and restoration items to be done, but the water main, the connection at Cedar Lake was made. All of the pressure tests and the bacterial tests have passed. So the water main is active, but it's not available to the residents yet, or to the plumbers that they might be contracting with, until we get it closed out with USDA RD, and the main then truly becomes the property of the township. So with the update today, we will be scheduling the on-site final walkthrough and final inspection with USDA RD. We will try to get that taken care of before the 4th of July holiday. Can't guarantee on that until I reach out to them tomorrow, but essentially everything is done. They're having a little bit of scheduling issues with their asphalt subcontractor. nothing to be concerned about. It's just that the asphalt contractor, due to the wet weather we had a month ago, 3 weeks ago, is behind in schedule, and Elmer's is technically kind of ahead of schedule, so we will get the asphalt subcontractor out there and get the road patches completed, the driveway approaches that are asphalt completed, and such, and get this in the topsoil and seeding and mulching finalized. And I believe John Wilson reached out to Doug Mullen yesterday or today. Doug's kind of in concurrence with that, and we will finalize all the paperwork and get this thing active. We are currently, for the report I sent in, we had 37 property owners that had inquired about connecting water services. That is actually now up to 40. Based at the last board meeting, the approval of the board for us to proceed with identifying maybe up to 3 contractors that the residents could reach out to and contract with, or if they have their own plumber that they want to work with, they can do that too. I've got John Henry Incorporated is interested. I've got a call into Shaft Construction to see if they're interested. Have not heard back from them yet. And also Goyette Mechanical. Those were 3 of the 5 contractors that had submitted on the phase 1 project last year. So the thought is they're familiar with the township's specifications. They would be good for the residents to contract with. Using 3 contractors, hopefully that would get the residents a good and economical price to hook up. But that will be a negotiated agreement between them and the individual contractors. We will continue to kind of monitor that, so that Doug is aware of when services are complete and all of that. So again, that we make sure that they're done properly. We anticipate getting like I said, if I can get response back from those 2 other contractors tomorrow, we will get another letter notice out to all of the residents, providing the contact information for these contractors, and also kind of the procedures they would need to go through with either these or their own plumber or contractor. And then as soon as the township is truly in ownership of the main, then these services could start being scheduled and connected. We know of one property owner that has already got a contractor and was asking our inspector today if he could get the contractor out to hook up today, but unfortunately we had to tell him we couldn't allow that yet. So it looks like we got some pretty good interest. We will get this thing moving, and we can put a fork in the phase 2 project. The next 2 bullet items on here were kind of covered in the public hearings, the specific funding opportunities that we're continuing to chase down. I mentioned the CBDGIR grant that we were not funded for this year's round. Mr. Schaefer and myself had a good conversation with MEDC on the process, and I think we've got a means to continue the dialogue with them and some of their other staff to see what future opportunities are available to the township, and possibly changes to our approach for next year's CBDGIR grant application to see if we would qualify at that time. Obviously, we mentioned the ECWAG grant earlier in tonight's meeting, and also the DWRF and CWSRF applications that are being finalized. We are always continuing to look for other funding opportunities through the various agencies, Consumers Energy, Eagle, through different sections of Eagle, through MEDC for different types of funding opportunities, and then anything else that surfaces out there, and we will continue to coordinate those efforts with Mr. Schaefer excuse me, in identifying possible applications to submit. The sanitary sewer improvements, that was discussed before. That's the sanitary, the SRF application and the projects that we'll be completing under that. Phase 1 water main assistance, we have a change order in place for the board's approval 1 or 2 meetings ago with John Henry. We have notices out to the 2 property owners on Bissonnet and also Jeff Moss at Whispering Woods to get the authorization agreement signed, document signed, along with the construction easement that we'll need to complete this. Jeff Moss and Henry are also communicating on some additional work that Jeff Moss will contract directly with John Henry on. So that's why I wanted to make sure the change order was very clear on what the township will be building with their grant funds through John Henry, and not the entire project that or the rest of the project that Jeff Moss is talking to him about. John Henry knows that the schedule for this work is absolutely needs to be wrapped up by 12/31 of 2020, and that's when the grant funding expires. But he anticipates getting started on that hopefully next month in July. And again, if everything goes according to plan, he should have it wrapped up with restoration and seeding taking place and taking hold in the September, October timeframe. The biggest piece of that project will be the Whispering Woods. Old Orchard Campground dock, public dock and erosion drainage. That project, we have finalized the plans, well, preliminary plans. Those are in front of Gary and Al out at the park for their review and comment on, with the idea that we will incorporate anything that they would like to see, just any construction estimates that we would have, finalize the coordination with Consumers Energy and Eagle and DNR based on the site, and then discuss with the township on whether or not that would be work that the township can undertake, or a portion of it that the township can undertake, and maybe which portion of it would have to be advertised and turned over to a contractor. Either way, based on where we're at with the project, we would think that that would be available for fall construction. Obviously, with your late start to your season out there, we would want to obviously closely coordinate with staff out there to not interfere with any of the campground activities and such that will be able to take place this summer and fall. So the Old Orchard Campground electrical upgrades is complete. I believe in the packet tonight is the final pay app for Haney Electric. Talked to Gary the other day. Everything is done and completed. They're accepting the project. The inspector reviewed it and accepted the project, and therefore we have, I think it was 35 upgraded electrical sites out there now. That's moving forward. The trail project, really the last project I have to report on tonight. We're working with MDOT Planning, Dave Schaefer and myself, on getting some of the final documents that Kathy Sampelli needs to finalize the application that is moving through the system. From what we understand, they are going to move through the application process with both options that we have out there. The option that we go from the schools, the Foot Village, and then also the complete option, or the complete path length from the schools all the way to the campground entrance. So they're going to proceed with both of those through the application process. So again, like I said, we're finalizing some documents and some clarification that she needs. From what we understand, the decision on this round of applications will be near the end of July. And then if the township is successful and we can find the rest of the sources of funding for the local match, you technically could be out for bid and under construction on this phase in 2021. Or again, the key element is when we can secure the local match, but we'll be working with them on that. And essentially, that's my report. Everything, the final page of my report, those projects are pretty much all on hold or nothing new to report on. So I guess with that, if anybody has any questions, I can answer them at this time.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that update.
Thank you.
All right, from the Economic Improvement Director, Todd Dickerson. There we go, Todd.
All right, good evening, everybody. As presented in your packet, I've got the dashboards for this month. The place lead strategies, as I footnoted below, lots of activity, but we haven't moved much from bucket to bucket, so the percentages are pretty close to what we had last year. Although happy to report, at least 50% of those activities are in process at this point. Same story with the downtown task. We've got 33% in process, 55 yet to be started. But as I note below, with the summit, the downtown summit being rescheduled for July 28th, that really unlocks about 57% of our tasks and our activities to get going and move down the pipeline. So once we have the downtown summit, we collect business and stakeholder input, further develop our strategies for facade improvements or art. The parking's in there. You'll see a lot of movement going forward in the coming months with that. RRC in pretty good shape. We've got 41% complete now and only 11% uncompleted or not started. As I included in the information on the activity summary, our fellow from CDAM, Ryan Mattis, started today. He started virtually, and a lot of his focus out of the gate will be related to the RRC task. So I expect by the end of July that 11% not started will be a 0. And I expect us to be able to put a nice full court press on getting more in the completed bucket. And then as far as projects go, I'm still reporting 17 active projects. Although at the end of the week after this was published, I had some conversations with some business owners and activities that I will probably put on hold for next month's report. Not that they're canceled, but sort of on hold indefinitely, and don't want to really inflate our opportunity or activities. So look for that next month. But on a positive note, Dave and I are active with 3 different developers who are looking and considering multifamily projects. So we talk with them weekly, different ones. I just had a meeting today with a potential developer that's very intrigued with a multifamily project up there. So we'll keep at it, and sooner or later we're going to have more apartments up there. So that's the dashboard piece. Activity summary. Again, CDAM fellow Ryan Mattis started today. He's virtual through CDAM's guidelines until the first part of July. So we have him slated to be in town and working working on site basically July 6th after the 4th of July holiday. Further in the agenda, the board will have an opportunity to consider moving forward with a brokerage RFP. We've had a lot of discussions with the EIC committee on what the appropriate tasks might be or the approach might be. And so at this time, they are recommending we go out for another RFP because we didn't have a lot of interest the first time around, and Solicit putting the Huron Shores Artisan Hall building within that listing, start there. Do Ani Medical on our own for 6 months. We plan on targeting the aerospace industry, and as we're moving forward through the Spaceport licensing process, seems to be reason to believe that that could be good office space for that sector. So the thought is we'll take that upon ourselves for 6 months, see what opportunities we can kick up ourselves. If we don't feel like we're getting traction within that strategy, then come January, the EIC would likely recommend that we put the Ani Medical Center within the listing agreement. Digital 55 work continues to march along. We had the team up May 21st for drone flight. We got a lot of good video, a lot of good photo shots of the airport, the properties that we have available for sale. I included a sample draft property data sheet that we've created for marketing materials. We'll be hopefully finalizing several of those in July. We've got the draft parking map that was included in your packet as well. And again, hopefully we'll have that. I'll do a couple of markups, a couple edits to that, have that finalized in the next couple of weeks. And then we have a project meeting for the microsite tomorrow, and I'm pegging that right now at about 30% complete. Downtown Summit has been rescheduled for July 28th at the Warrior Pavilion. We've decided to do 2 sessions, one at 3 p.m. and one at 7 p.m. Doing that for a couple of different reasons. One, kind of spread out the population. People will have more room in the pavilion. If there's still any remaining concerns or fears over COVID. And also the thought process that there's a certain probably percentage that could attend before 5 o'clock as part of their workday, and another percentage of folks that may elect and want to do it more in the evening hours. So that was our reason for splitting that up. And we've got a stakeholder public opinion survey that we will be launching in the coming days, either tomorrow or Wednesday, to start gathering the stakeholder input for that summit. We'll see how much response we get through email and media campaigns, and we're prepared to go knock on doors and go hand it out in person if we have to gain as much feedback as we can going into Downtown Summit. With respect to different grants and other opportunities in the grant space that we've been after, we were not awarded the Match on Main grant. In the northeastern segment of Michigan, Rogers City was awarded, and I think their award was $42,000. So unfortunately, we were not the winning horse in that race. And then Dave and I will be putting a full court press on assisting the airport with their MEDC Site Ready grant, and start having some meetings about pursuing EDA grant opportunities for infrastructure out on the Wordsmith area business area. And then lastly, you've got an updated meeting schedule for the EIC because of the work that seems to be in the pipeline, work and opportunities activity we're generating. We felt it necessary to actually start meeting twice a month instead of once a month. So we will now be meeting on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month at 4 o'clock at the Huron Shores Artisan Hall building. And again, that updated schedule is in your packet. Those are my highlights for the board.
Thank you very much. Next is the annual report from Central Dispatch.
All right, and Jim, you can jump in whenever you want, but basically the 911 Central Dispatch, they put together an annual summary. What you'll see in your packet, you have the annual report, but it also talks about some of the initiatives that are going on in the Central Dispatch. So when you talk about, page 50, they talk about completed projects for the Central Dispatch, and then moving forward, you'll see there are projects that are in progress and in the future. As far as the 911 plan and bylaws, the CAD system in there is the computer assistance dispatching system. So they're going to be updating that as far as hardware and a public alert system as well. After that, pages 54 is where it starts in on the data for the different calls, and they actually break it out by EMS calls, fire calls, law enforcement calls. And so it's broken out in there by, it'll show you all versus the Oscoda Township Police Department, Fire Department in there. And then it also gives a top 10 as far as the different calls that they're responding to. I also saw page 58, and the next 4 pages are the bylaws as of July 21st, 2010. And so that's all good information in there, submitted by the Central Dispatch. As far as the 2019 annual report, this was presented to the 911 board. And that was at the last meeting on Wednesday, June 10th, that Jim Baier and I attended.
And the May 2020 operating report.
Now, Doug is on here.
Catherine is unmuted, and Doug is unmuted.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody. Just to give a summary of, guess let's just get to the nitty-gritty with the work order and service calls. We have it tabulated from January to May, and you can see everything's going up a little bit. We're getting pretty busy. Work order totals 197 this month. Missed digs were 104. Overall total between the two is 301. Got a lot going on, finding services, putting in meter pits, curb stop replacements, service lines leaking, goes on and on. What was really nice on 6955 US 23, there's a picture in there, and the homeowner actually called and was appreciative of the quality of work that was performed. That was a nice phone call, so I remember those. But anyway, Kath, if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, I did want to mention the lagoon operations. You will see in the appendices on that, under the monitoring and reporting, that if you look at the far, or the second to the right column on flow, that you'll see some higher numbers starting at about the 19th of May. So we had 611,000 gallons on the 19th, 663,000 gallons on the 20th, and there was a little bit of a lower volume, and then there were some significantly higher volumes toward the end of the month. What occurred with that is we had that severe rain and flooding, so we did have a lot of infiltration inflow into the system at that time. What Doug experienced was that the lagoon, the operating level of the lagoon came up, not just the flows. And so toward the end of the month, they actually made some adjustments to the discharge valving to bring that operating level back down to the normal operating level. All of those dates that are over the 625,000 gallons that is listed in the NPDES permit are considered a violation by Eagle. However, you know, in the case of that situation, when you have high flows, there was nothing that we could have done to control those high flow numbers, you know, without overflowing the lagoon site, which obviously would be an even larger violation. So just wanted to draw that to your attention. However, you know, everybody's been doing a great job. If you look at the effluent quality numbers, especially the phosphorus, and see the 0.3 milligrams per liter of total phosphorus, that parameter is in good control. Normally about this time of year, we start to see some activity as far as reduction in ammonia nitrogen numbers. So far, we have not seen that. That may be a result of water temperature and or aeration at the facility. We are staging in the next couple weeks to begin cleaning the air diffusers as we did last year, removing all the rags, debris, and other materials that have accumulated on those, utilizing the lagoon pontoon boat that the township owns. So there'll be a lot of work going into that, and Doug will be monitoring that for especially safety, because that is a hazardous endeavor for the staff, especially because some of the material that they're pulling off of there includes things like sharp objects that could cause puncture wounds. So they have to be very careful. Does anybody have any questions in regard to the lagoon operation?
Okay. Anything else for F&B?
I have, Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Palmer. I have one comment relating to the utility billing clerk. I just wanted to relay that I think she's doing a fantastic job. And one example of that hit me personally just about a month ago. She called here to inform me that in reviewing my bill, it was approximately double what my normal water bill would be. And of course, I explained to her, well, that's probably because we have 3 times the number of people here than we normally have, because I had my daughter and son-in-law and 2 granddaughters living here with us, one a newborn. And so I expected the water to be higher. And then when I got off the phone, my daughter asked, she said, who was that? And I said, well, that was our utility billing clerk informing me that, you know, our water bill was higher than normal. And I, you know, if I needed to check into that. So my daughter said, well, that seems to be above and beyond the call of duty. And I agreed with that. So I wanted to just mention that, you know, things like that, I think are I mean, there might've been a problem here on my property that I wasn't even aware of. Would have brought it to my attention to, you know, check into that. So I felt like that was something she really didn't need to do, but that she did, and I wanted to acknowledge her for that. So thank you.
Okay, any other project updates? I wanted to bring up that with the governor releasing another order late last week, I had charted out all of the executive orders over the weekend to try and get some semblance of sense of what is going on. And from that, it looks like we have in July no restrictions as far as us having a in-person meeting, board meeting, other than the 50 people indoors. So I was planning on having our next regular board meeting as a normal meeting at the library, unless there's something else that comes down from the governor that says differently. Anybody have any comments regarding that? Okay, then on to reports. 2020 appropriations for the Drug Forfeiture Fund 265.
All right, your packet contains note 19, prior period adjustment from the Township's 2019 audit. The Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265 was created by Resolution 2020-07, passed by the Township Board at the meeting the 13th of April, 2020. Board members will note that the presentation of the 2019 audit contained reference to the implementation of the GASB 84 requirements necessitating the creation of the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265. Due to the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265 not being created until April of 2020, the board has not previously created appropriations for this fund. The request proposed to the board would create the entire $6,774 amount to be spent on law enforcement equipment in 2020. The township were to obtain more revenue into the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265 at a future date. A similar request would be made to the board by the police chief to appropriate more funds at that time. If the proposed request were to be approved by the board, the police chief would be detailing a request to purchase law enforcement equipment with these restricted funds at a board meeting in the near future. This requires township board approval.
Comments?
I have a comment on this, and kind of an apology that I didn't pick up on this at the last meeting during our audit review on this particular page, not relating to the drug forfeiture fund, but the DDA account. I did not realize that this $9,750 that was adjustment from the DDA account to the general fund was from 2018. And so what that means is that that entire balance of the carryover to 2019 from Fund 248 was incorrect by nearly $10,000 at the beginning of 2019. And I know I've been beating the drum on this 248, but it bothers me that we can't identify the fund balances to know how to appropriate money. We're going to be having work sessions coming up to deal with a new budget, and when we don't know what the balances are, it seems like an exercise in futility to me to try and have some semblance of a budget when we don't know what our balances are from previous years. So I apologize for not catching this at the last meeting. I looked at this page and I didn't catch the line where it says it's from December of 2018, and that $9,750 was not posted until March of this year and dated for December 1st of 2019 to fulfill the requirement. But it's just troubling to me that we're not following up on these funds, what our carryover balances are, and it's frustrating to me. So the drug forfeiture fund, that needs to be approved. So I guess if there's no other comment, I will move to approve the 2020 appropriations for the drug forfeiture fund 265 in the amount of $6,774.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Gorsky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. 2020 expenditures booked to the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265.
Your packet contains a detail of the law enforcement equipment requested to be booked against 2020 appropriations for the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265. Based on the previous action item, is being requested the board approve $2,414.46 worth of law enforcement equipment purchases be booked against 2020 appropriations for the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265. This equipment is in line with the enforcement-related expenditures associated with the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265. Of the total $6,774 beginning 2020 fund balance for the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265, that would leave $4,359.54 for the future law enforcement equipment requests, and this requires Township Board approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve $2,414.46 in expenditures be booked against 2020 appropriations for the Drug Law Enforcement Equipment Fund 265.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Baier. Roll call.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Request to increase 2020 appropriations for the General Fund 101.
Your packet contains invoices from Rowe concerning the Phase 3 of the Iosco Exploration Trail, as well as BS&A reports, all related to 2020 general fund appropriations being proposed to the Township Board. The proposed $10,118.43 increase to 2020 general fund appropriations are comprised of the Rowe invoices to the General Fund 101-751-880.572, Parks and Recreation for $9,765 associated with Phase 3 of the IET. General Fund 101-722-709.000 Planning and Zoning for $44.03 associated with overtime for the previous zoning administrator, and General Fund 101-754-710.000 Ratliff Park for $309.40 in overtime for the DPW. These requests would increase total 2020 general fund appropriations from $3,232,099 up to $3,242,218. This requires Township Board approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we increase the 2020 appropriations for the general fund to the tune of $10,118.43.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Baier, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Roll proposal for SRF Engineering and Construction Administration Services.
So your packet contains a proposal from Rowe dated the 17th of June, 2020 for the Oscoda Township wastewater pump station improvements, design and construction engineering services for the SRF project. The packet also contains an overview as well as a detailed pump station work description. Board members will note that these improvements to the sanitary sewer system aligned with the asset management plan outlined and prioritized in the SAW grant. The proposal details both the design engineering and construction engineering costs totaling $769,600 that would be included in the total project costs associated with the SRF. Mr. Freeman is attending the Zoom meeting, can answer any questions associated with the proposal. There is a resolution later on in the agenda associated with the SRF application. This requires Township Board approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal from Rowe in the amount of $769,600 for SRF engineering and construction engineering administration services for sanitary sewer projects in 2020 through 2023.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Final pay invoice for Haney Electric.
So your packet contains an email from Rowe dated the 17th of June, 2020, associated with a final pay invoice of $3,532.66 to be paid out of the Old Orchard Park Capital Improvement Fund 218-000-984.000 for Haney Electric associated with the Old Orchard Park electrical upgrade. As stated in the previous mentioned email, all the electrical upgrades have been successfully tested, and this would close out the project. This requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
I will be curious to hear from from Al and the campers out there, what their thoughts are on this upgraded electrical service. I know we've had some complaints on this in the past, so I'm hoping this addresses that.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the payment to the final payment for Haney Electric in the amount of $3,532.66.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Mcguire, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call?
Mr. Baier,
I think we should hear from Al and the customers if the system is working before we make the final payment. So my vote is no.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Professional services contract agreement with HydroCorp.
Packet contains a professional services contract agreement signed by HydroCorp with a cost not to exceed $93,073 to be paid out of the Water Fund 591-000-980.100 for the installation of 1,142 utility meter and radio read transmitters. The packet also contains a memo dated the 20th of January 2020 from the utility operator project manager detailing the options for companies to install utility meters and radio read devices for approximately 1/3 of the township's water system. Board members will note that this project spans for the next 3 years from the township's capital improvements plan for 2020, 2021, and 2022. With the utility meters being the cash registers of the township's utility infrastructure, this proposal is being presented to the township board for approval to proceed with this project.
Comments?
Yeah, I'm happy to see this finally coming to fruition. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time and kept bringing to the table. And I'm finally happy to see it happening.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I do have one question on the contract itself. It doesn't specifically state HydroCorp. It keeps mentioning professional.
Okay.
Is there some reason that we have that, or is this just our standard contract that would need to be changed and have HydroCorp's name filled in?
Okay, so I think in the very first paragraph, I could insert HydroCorp as further to be referenced as professional throughout this agreement.
Okay, yeah, so at least we know the specific company we're dealing with, not just professional.
Sure.
Yep.
Any further comments or a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the contract agreement with HydroCorp and authorize the clerk and supervisor to execute the contract.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Mcguire, support by Mr. Baier. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Back to the pay invoice for Haney Electric. Mr. Schaefer, would you authorize payment of this bill prior to knowing that the electrical system is working?
No, so Roe, as Rick mentioned before, has been in contact with Gary out there at Old Orchard Park. They specifically tested all the different sites, and Al just texted me and said that the electricity works and there were no issues associated with it today, being that the first one, this was the first that the campers moved in.
Okay, thank you. Lumber for Octagon Pavilion decking.
Your packet contains a detailed estimate of $2,100 to be paid out of General Fund 101-754-975.000 for treated lumber to complete the decking adjacent to the Octagon Pavilion at Ken Ratliff Memorial Park. If approved, board members will note that DPW would install the decking in this purchase. This purchase requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
Yeah, I thought we were going to try to make things maintenance free. Putting lumber on that deck is not maintenance free. And number two, is there going to be a railing across that wall? Or is it going to be just a platform and right into the water?
No, they got to put a railing there, Marty.
It's not in the quote. When are they going to do that?
The railing would be built out of the treated lumber.
Pardon me?
The railing would be built out of the treated lumber.
Yeah, but they're only ordering 2x6s. That's for decking. You might want to check into that. Too bad Bill isn't online right now.
What was that, Marty? I'm sorry.
Too bad Bill isn't online right now. We could ask him a few questions on this. I'd like to see the quote for the railing along with the deck at the same time.
I can follow up with Bill.
I'll make a motion to table the decking lumber request until the next meeting.
I'll support that.
Dave, while we're at it with the rail issue, is it your understanding that they have checked the undercarriage of this deck? I guess they might be called floor joists. Are they adequate? Or are we putting a brand new floor over crappy foundation?
No, they definitely checked the integrity of the entire seawall that's up there, and you know, found that there's deadheads that come significantly into the shore to help shore that up. So they didn't know exactly what they were getting into when they started removing that, and they were very happy to see that the integrity there along the seawall was properly installed. So no,
Okay.
we're not covering up a problem with new decking.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Motion is for tabling this. Is this to table it and discuss it later in this meeting, or is it to postpone it?
Why would we discuss it later in the meeting?
That's what tabling means for postponing to the same meeting. Postponing means to go to another meeting. So that's why I was checking for clarity.
I would say that it was postponed till the next meeting till we could get clarity.
Okay. So we have a motion. Is there support for that?
I'll support it.
Motion by Ms. Mcguire, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
No. Motion is passed. DPW request for mower and trailer purchase.
All right. Packet contains a memo dated the 9th of June 2020 from the DPW supervisor requesting the purchase of a Ferris mower, bagger system Fastback, and a trailer for a project cost of $19,000 to be paid out of the Public Improvement Fund 245-980-980.000. Board members will note that the DPW provided several examples of potential trailers that could be used. And as the memo from the DPW states, the board members will note that the request is to serve as a replacement for the 3/4 ton truck, the Township's CIP slated for 2020. This requires Township board approval.
Comments?
I think it's a good idea. Just I got a question on the truck. This is a truck that F&B used to use, and they had a lot of problems with the steering. Do we know what that steering's gonna cost us to repair it to keep that truck? That can run into quite a bit of money.
You're saying the 3/4 ton truck, you want to know what it's gonna cost to replace the steering on the
Steering
3/4
on
ton
it, yes.
truck?
You're right, to
Okay,
fix the steering, Dave, because that steering gave F&B a problem.
I can ask Bill.
Yeah. Make sure we get it fixed. 'Cause you could turn that wheel quite a ways before it even turned.
So would we reschedule the purchase of the truck to like next year or something? How would that work?
Yeah, they would propose to push out the purchase of a truck several years.
Because the only thing I see on the CIP under the Public Improvement Fund 245 is a 3/4 ton pickup, 2-wheel drive, $30,000 in 2020. And then there's nothing after that all the way out to 2025.
Yeah, there's a couple on there for the CIP. Just hold, please. There's another parks cleaning truck for 2023 slated for $24,000. And then between sewer fund 590 and 591, there would be another pickup or van slated for 2025.
Well, I guess my point was that, you know, we'll need to replace that truck at some point, if we can do that next year. If they feel they need the mower and the bagger now, then I would say let's do that, get the mower, and that's less money than we're going to spend on a truck, and we can reschedule in the CIP for the truck purchase at a later date.
Sure, and we'll have Bill and Kenny in front of the board either the 29th or the 30th of July to kind of hash out how we can reschedule that and what year.
Sure. Well, I'll make a motion to approve the DPW's request to purchase a Ferris mower, bagger system, Fastback, and Trickler in an amount not to exceed $19,000.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings. Did I hear a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire.
Yes.
Mr. Baier.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion's passed. All right, sanitary sewer camera project.
All right, both I think Doug and Kath are still on here. There he is. Doug's coming back. Your packet contains an email dated the 16th of June, 2020, associated with the sanitary sewer camera project. A crew with the sanitary sewer capability was mobilized from Saginaw, requesting that the board approve a project cost not to exceed $5,000 to be paid out of the sewer fund 590-000-930.000 to diagnose the problems at Hangar 7. The hope is that I'll have more information. So right now, we obtained the video, and it appears that there was an internet provider that bored directly through the sanitary sewer out on the base, and both Kath and Doug are working to be able to locate all of the misdigs and the information associated with that for the construction company as well as the service provider. And we're going to be following up to make sure that the service provider is responsible for the repairs to the sanitary sewer main out there. Doug, what am I, Aaron, can you unmute Doug for a second? He was.
I have.
Doug, what am I missing?
What's that?
I said, did I miss anything there?
No, you summed it up pretty well.
Oh, hold on. Now
Yes.
Kath is waving. Can you unmute Kath for a second?
I have.
I did mention to Dave earlier that we do need to verify the areas where they did the fiber optic boring to make sure that there are not any other sanitary sewer mains that have been impacted by this. So we'll be looking to find from them a print or a plan of where they did the install and overlay that on the sewer system to see if there are any other lines that we need to check before this becomes an issue elsewhere.
Okay.
And I have a question regarding the $5,000 cost or up to that. So would we be able to recover that cost? from the internet service provider who is out there doing that work while we also get repairs. Very good. I just wanted to be specific about that. Thank you.
And the previous crews that have been mobilized associated with this problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or a motion?
I move that we approve an amount not to exceed $5,000 for the sanitary sewer camera project.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Request to increase superintendent purchase limit.
All right, so that same email I sent about the sanitary sewer camera project, I wanted to also use as supporting documentation to request my purchasing limit to $10,000. During the pandemic, the Township Board temporarily raised my purchasing authority up to $15,000. Township Board members were kept apprised of all the departmental purchases when my purchasing limit was temporarily increased to $15,000. The emergency situation detailed in the previous action item is a prime example of where $2,000 of purchasing threshold limits the Township's operations. The Township's original 2020 appropriations of the general fund, $3,152,280. The $10,000 threshold would be 0.317% of 2020 general fund appropriations. Even less, far less percent of all funds appropriated. The Township Board were to accept the permanent increase in my purchasing limit from $2,000 up to $10,000. Process would remain consistent with discussing all items on the capital improvements plan. The Township Board as part of the annual appropriations process. Township Board members will also continue to review the payment of bills and supporting documentation provided on a bi-weekly basis for all expenditures. Just as I've done during the pandemic, even for items far less than $15,000, I would keep the Township Board members apprised of items being purchased by the departments. And this requires Township Board approval.
Mr. Schaefer, what is the purchasing limit of the East Tawas City Manager?
$10,000.
Dave, during the time you had a $15,000 limit, what was the highest expenditure that you approved of?
There was I believe, a $12,000 purchase, but it was brought to the Township Board for approval anyway. So it wasn't to the point where it was an emergency and yes, I got to do this right now. I still brought it to the board for approval anyway, because it wasn't a burning platform, we got to do this right now type of issue.
Mm-hmm. So you brought it to the board before the expenditure was made, before?
Correct, even though it was below $15,000.
Do you think that 10,000 new limit is appropriate? I mean, we're increasing this by 5 times, from 2,000 to 10. You think this is a good thing? And
I do.
I guess I'm wondering where the
streamline a lot of these meetings as well.
Yeah, that's not all bad. Okay, all right.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, motion to permanently increase the Township Superintendent's purchasing power limit to $10,000.
Support.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Real estate brokerage RFP.
Packet contains the proposed RFP for real estate brokerage services. The Economic Improvement Committee is recommending from the draft EIC meeting minutes from the 9th of June 2020. After thoughtful consideration, the previously submitted broker proposal was rejected. The EIC proposes re-advertising for proposals for a professional services agreement between the township and a real estate broker, limiting the listings to the Huron Shores Artisan Hall to begin the relationship. Future listings of township-owned property ready for disposition can be added during the contract.
Comments? Is there a motion? Oh, stand by. Okay, Mr. Dickerson.
Yes.
Do you have anything to add to this?
Nope. I think Dave covered it nicely.
Okay.
Is this why we, the way this is written, is this why we had less people apply this time to become a broker for the township?
Well, the thinking was through Real Estate One, there were 37 listings. Many of them were single site, quarter of an acre listing, potentially residential type plot. And the thinking was that maybe it's deemed too much to manage without the reward, the broker getting the reward for all the work. So they decided that maybe we pare it down to a couple, and in this case, one. We'll start with one, and maybe that would incentivize more people to want to submit. Instead of trying to manage 37 listings, maybe a smaller number of listings is more desirable for brokers to be interested.
Any other comments or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Economic Improvement Director to publishing an RFP for real estate brokerage services for township-owned properties from August 2020 through August 2022.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Baier. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Appraisal RFQ for Ani Medical Facility.
Your packet contains a recommendation from the Economic Improvement Committee as referenced in the draft EIC meeting minutes from the 9th of June 2020 for the Township Board to hire a Michigan licensed appraiser to provide an appraisal report for the Ani Medical Facility. The proposed RFQ solicitation is included for your review. The recent facility tours conducted by MAMA reveals the Ani building could hold office space value for prospective businesses entering the market for spaceport operations. An appraisal would allow the township to have a truer understanding of the value and be better suited to self-market the building to the target audience of spaceport operators. If we are unable to generate qualified leads by year's end, then the township would decide to release the listing to the current real estate broker. The appraisal will still hold value, knowing it is being offered in the market at a fair price. This requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
What's this appraisal gonna cost me?
We're asking the RFQ for appraisal services to come back.
Okay, so this is that's just to get an appraiser online so we can move forward with it.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other comments or a motion?
Well, I think that's a smart move. We've been trying to come up with a figure on the Awney Center, and I think it's worth spending some money to get a professional appraisal on that building. And given the potential for, Spaceport, opens up a lot more possibilities for that large building. So I think that's a very good idea, and I would make a motion to approve the Economic Improvement Director publishing an RFQ for appraisal services related to the Awney Medical Facility.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes, I have a question though, I guess after the roll call.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. What's your question?
The question is, are we going to get a quote for an appraisal for somebody? I'm sorry, never mind. Consider the improvement to publish the RFQ for appraisal services. Okay, never mind.
That's RFQ.
Something else.
Yeah.
All right, resolution and ordinances. First one for fees for vacant building registration.
Right, so this was a carryover item from the Township Board meeting on the 8th of June. As requested, I modeled a 10-year cost of non-compliance starting at $10, starting at $25, and starting at $50. Board members will note that the vacant building registration ordinance states that $1,000 is the maximum annual fine. Board members will also note that the annual compounding effect of the annual fee resets after the building is brought into compliance, and your packet contains an email from the zoning administrator explaining that.
Comments?
I have a question, and it was the last time we saw this resolution, there was some confusion. I was wondering if Mr. Tasher or someone involved in this particular resolution would like to speak.
Okay, so
I'm looking for information just because the last time we heard about this, it was confusing, and we ended up leaving this resolution, well, basically confused. What I'm trying to find out right now is I'd like to hear from somebody who knows about this resolution to explain what it is that it is. So speak further on this, because last time we were getting a lot of confusion. So is there anything that anybody wants to say on this to clarify the confusion from the last meeting? Or do we just take this at face value?
I guess I could, I'm on the Planning Commission and the Planning Subcommittee committee that drafted this ordinance. So whatever questions you might have, I'll try and answer. As I mentioned at our last meeting when we were going over this, is that it wasn't intended necessarily to be a punishing thing. We wanted the planning commission's thought was to have a minimal registration fee, $25 to $50, and I think it helps to look at this spreadsheet that's been created that shows, based on the different amounts, at what year you hit the $1,000 mark, and then it continues. So that and there are a number. If you look at the ordinance itself, there are a number of exemptions, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish with this, is to get the owners of these buildings to bring them up to code, put them on the market for sale, advertise them for lease or rent, try and get these buildings occupied. I mean, that's the underlying reason for this ordinance. And there are a number of ways that owners of these buildings can, be in compliance and not suffer the penalties of a higher registration fee, simply by taking a number of measures, and they're all listed in the ordinance. And it's the penalizing part comes in for the owners that simply ignore that and continue year after year after year, which we've seen for a number of years now, just to leave the buildings empty without any action whatsoever. And I mean, I can't guarantee that this will spur somebody to action that hasn't done anything in years, but it's in my opinion a move in that direction. So if you have specific questions, I would try and answer them.
Well, I want to start by saying thank you for the spreadsheet on page 139. I was looking for that the last time when you were asking us to make a decision about the starting number, and this is helpful. We can see how it grows depending on what we start with. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill, can you tell me if there's any other township or city or anything that has this ordinance in place?
No, I can't.
Can you tell me, because I can't seem to locate it in the ordinance or the registration, what happens if they don't pay the fee?
Well, then it would become there's language in there that explains that.
Which is what?
Well, let me see if I can pull that up. It is non-compliance. Any form of non-compliance of this ordinance shall result in a civil infraction being issued.
So civil infraction being issued, and then the county gets all the money for that if they do get a civil infraction?
If it goes to court, yeah.
Why wouldn't you just put it on their taxes for the next year, like you do if somebody doesn't mow their lawn and it gets out of hand and the DPW has to go and mow the lawn? If I'm correct, the price for that service just goes on a person's taxes. And I think you'd have a lot less litigation that way. If I'm right on how things work, on my example about lawns being out of control and other things, I'm sure.
I believe that we were advised to go the civil infraction. I believe there was some problem with trying to add these fees to a tax roll.
If I remember correctly, I think Saginaw has a similar ordinance. And Detroit may have one also.
I know
Similar.
I know Saginaw has one, Aaron.
Okay.
The city of Saginaw.
I'm confused. Similar to what the planning?
Fine.
Okay.
What they're trying to impose. They have one that's annual fee.
Any other comments or questions?
I'm still questioning why the document's coming to us with a blank spot. I think that the planning commission should make their recommendations and then the board take that under advisement.
Well, that's what the spreadsheet was for that I asked for in the last meeting when I asked to push this out and get clarification and basically put that spreadsheet together. So on 1B9, we can decide which of those three values or something different.
Right, I understand that was your question, Tim. My question was for them to fill in the blanks.
Well, it's actually for the township board to fill in the blank. That's the whole point of this resolution, is for us to come up with a number to put in that blank.
And like I said at the last meeting, then why we didn't determine the fees for the watercraft that you did a couple weeks before that. The fees were already there.
Well, we made a recommendation. The township board approved that. I believe the recommendation coming from the planning commission was for $25. I think I relayed that to the board at the last meeting, that was the general recommendation from the planning commission, was for a $25 fee. In the discussions last week, there was discussion by other members of the board that thought maybe it should be more than that. So that's the reason for the blank. And if someone wants to make a motion or an idea of whether the 10, 25, 50 or some other number to plug into that, I think that's what we have to determine here tonight with this resolution.
Anybody have any recommendations?
Well, I kind of like the 25 or 50. I think the 10 is kind of it's just like what's the point? I do think that we're still, again, to go back to last week's meeting, the purpose of this is to try to improve downtown and to try to turn around some of these buildings that are not being maintained and which have been empty for years. So, granted, 25, even $50 is something of a parking ticket, and to that degree, somewhat punitive. I don't consider any of these numbers, these starting numbers of 10, 25, or 50, to be deal breakers. I think that I would shoot for 50.
Saginaw's is a $150.
That's a very interesting comparison. Well,
just as a point of reference, I know that they are a
Fair
different
enough.
kind of municipality.
Sure, fair enough. Agreed.
Any other recommendations?
Well, I would just repeat what the thought from the planning commission was, and that was a $25 fee. So if the board would prefer to increase that to 50, then that's the board's That's why we're here. The board has to determine the fees.
Well, I think this particular topic has had a lot of airtime for a long time. I mean, I think long before I was on this board, we've talked about downtown. We still continue to talk about it. Many people in town talk to us individually, as we've all acknowledged in the past, about trying to do something about downtown. Clearly, you know, we can't force landowners, building owners to do anything except through some mechanism like this. So I think what I would like to suggest then is a motion that we approve resolution number 2020-11 with an application starting fee of $75.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Ms. Mcguire,
No.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Gieske,
No.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution for application of the ECWAG grant.
All right, so what you have in your packet for resolution 2020-13 is, as Mr. Freeman explained, the emergency and imminent community water assistance grant, and that the Oscoda would authorize professional services, professional services company to prepare application engineering report, which recommends the construction of phases A, B, C, and G of the water main extension with an estimated cost of $2 million.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I would move to approve resolution 2020-13 as it relates to the emergency and imminent community water assistance grant for water system improvements, and that the township superintendent, Dave Schaefer, is designated as the authorized representative.
Support. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gieske,
Yeah.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. The resolution for application of DWRF.
All right, so the DWRF is the resolution 2020-14 authorizes us, Rowe Professional Services Company, to prepare a project plan associated with the constructions of phases A through H of the water main extension. And this is the designating myself, the township superintendent, as the authorized representative.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Dave, you emailed us a updated. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yep.
This is the next resolution. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I move that we do go ahead with the application for the DWRF grant with Dave as the authorized officer.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Baier, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. The resolution for application of CWSRF.
All right, so the CWFRS, basically what this is to make improvements to the existing sanitary sewer, collection and pump station and lagoon treatment system. And it is to authorize Rowe Professional Services Company to prepare a project plan, which recommends the rehabilitation of sanitary sewer pumps, pump stations, and upgrades at the treatment plant in line with the township's asset management plan. As Mr. Palmer pointed out, I sent out a revised resolution 2020-15. It was also brought to my attention to the clerk. We carried language over that shouldn't have been carried over. And this needs to be specific for this SRF.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2020-15 as it relates to the sanitary sewer system improvements and designate Township Superintendent Dave Schaefer as the authorized representative.
Support. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Our next category is for other. We're approaching our 2.5-hour mark. Is there a motion regarding extending the meeting beyond that?
I'll make a motion that we extend the meeting past the 9:30 deadline to complete our business.
I would support that, but with the caveat that my little flip phone is running out of power, and I forgot, I'm downstate, and I forgot to bring my charger, and it takes a special charger. So if I disappear, you know why. So, but I support the motion.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Baier. Roll call.
Ms. Mcguire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Okay, appointment to the Board of Review. Jackie Gunnerman has requested to fill a vacancy on the Board of Review, which is the vacancies, the agenda addition regarding Elizabeth Swales. So does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
I think Jackie would do a fine job, and I would therefore make a motion that we do appoint Jackie Gunterman to the Board of Review.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Baier, support by Ms. Mcguire. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire.
Yes.
Mr. Baier.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. For the Zoning Board of Appeals, we've had a resignation on there at the last meeting, and Nita Wise has volunteered to fill that position. Are there any comments about that? Right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Nita to the zoning committee.
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Oh, I was reading her thing that said appointment to the zoning committee. Sorry, yes.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Mcguire, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Chamber request for Harbor House Publishing.
All right, so your packet contains an invoice from the chamber. Based on discussion with the board last year, I'm seeking authorization to pursue direct payment for the annual chamber membership directory and community profile for an amount not to exceed $2,600 through Harbor House. 10,000 of these booklets are printed on an annual basis and distributed throughout the state. Last year, the township included the newly developed community branding statement for the back cover of the community profile, seeking the board to approve the direct payment to Harbor House in an amount not to exceed $2,600 to be paid out of General Fund 101-299-880.000 for community promotion.
What's the difference in the amount from the actual invoice that received, the 5,500?
Yeah, so the 5,500, there's a new director at the chamber, and I kind of filled her in as far as the what happened last year, and basically the solution was that the township would pay the amount to Harbor House directly. The 5,500, you're asking for the dollar difference, so the 5,500 minus 2,600 is $2,900. So the township would not be paying an amount directly to the chamber, and instead authorize a payment not to exceed $2,600 to Harbor House directly for the publication of the community profile.
This is the back cover of the publication.
It is, and so last year we put on, it's a picture of the beach park with the branding statement on it with the new logo.
Okay. Well, I make a motion that we do go ahead with payment to Harbor House not to exceed $2,600.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Baier, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed,
No. Motion's passed. Part-time seasonal employee for Treasurer's Office.
So I sent out some background information for you guys today, late today. Hopefully everybody got it, had a chance to take a look at it. Some of the information I had provided before to the meeting that was not televised that we had many discussions about. What I did provide this time, because most of the board members, except for John, have never worked in the treasurer's office, I decided to utilize a staff comparison to help you clearly understand the staff necessity to operate the treasurer's office and to provide the personal customer service that we've been doing for the last many years. So under the staff comparison, there's 14 townships, city, villages that I solicited out on my listserv for the treasurers, and they provided me information back. If you look across the top, it gives you the township, the taxable value, the number of parcels, the tax amount that they collect, the admin fee that they collect, number of utility bills, what they pay out in accounts payable, the cash received in cash receiving year to date, and the number of full-time, part-time employees. So as you can see, out of the 14, we ranked third highest in the parcel count for people and payments, and third highest in the UB customers count and payments. And if you look across to those three high comparisons, you can see that the number one is five full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. The other one has 4 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. And ours in third has 2 full-time employees with 1 seasonal part-time employee and only 660 hours. If you look at some of the other ones, they vary a little bit, and some of the information, just so you know what it is, the NI means is they did not provide that information. Some of them have collaborative offices that work on things. Some of them have seasonal part-time set hours at 20 hours a week. What I'm asking the board to do is take a look at this and review it. I also provided on page 2 the total amounts to back up my information that I have on the spreadsheet of the total year-to-date applications. And I also provided, like I said, the information from our website that we did in the past, showing you that still, even with the opportunity for people to use the internet payments, and a lot of them use their own payments from home and generate it out of their tax accounts, but still the majority of the payments are coming in through the mail and over the counter. We have started utilizing more credit card payments for different things, but in regards to some of the comments, I remember that speaking about segregation of duties and cutting the staff office and the treasurer's office is going to create other comments from the auditors if we don't consider some other options. So I just wanted to put it all out there for you to look at and hopefully reconsider and maybe discuss a better way to staff the treasurer's office. I know that the last discussion, I was granted 6 months for the seasonal part-time person. However, due to the COVID, it got shut down and that person was not able to finish their 6 months with us. Aaron was also asked during public comment from somebody in the audience, because he voted no for that person and his reasoning was because he thinks things could be done more efficiently. But however, when he was asked what efficiencies there could be made improvements, none were given. So I'm hopeful to get that opportunity to have you guys look at this and maybe understand a little bit better about what goes on in the treasurer's office.
Hey, Jamie, this is Tim. So yeah, thanks very much for the PDF. It was I had to print it because the pages were upside down, but yeah, I get that. So thank you for the information. What's your exact ask? Are you looking for a couple months?
My exact ask, I would like to have that person reinstated year-round for their seasonal part-time. I know Bill Palmer asked me for a time study, and then he asked repeatedly for it. However, a time study isn't really going to do any of you that have never worked in the treasurer's office any good, because you really don't know what we do in here. So I figured the comparisons for other townships would give you a little bit better idea of what other townships and villages use for their staffing levels. And let's face it, if I did a time study, I could pick December or one of the other super busy months like February, or you could make me use April when I don't use anybody at all. So I still think that, I think the township overall, I think we've been very prudent in using our seasonal part-time person for only when we need them. We send them home when they're not busy. They can be utilized in other offices if need be, if somebody needed something else done, that type of thing. But I think we've done a good job over the years of utilizing that person. And I know I provided 3 letters that I hope you had the opportunity from previous employees that I'll give the clerk. I know he has a copy because I emailed everybody, three former employees and their thoughts on the position themselves.
Is that, I don't remember getting that, receiving that, but anyway, this was quite a packet of information you sent to us. I, like Tim, had to print it out, and I tried to go through it. Like some of the information you provided in the past had to do with amounts of money that are processed. I was more interested in other townships as opposed to cities. You have a number of cities, some fairly large cities on there, city of Muskegon, for example. I was more interested in townships and their populations as it relates to Oscoda Township. And I found a couple that I was able to get some information on. One is Grand Haven, which is in Ottawa County, has a population of 15,178. And referencing, Oscoda has a population of roughly 7,000, although I believe that's gone down recently. But anyway, they have 14,854 population, and they have a treasurer and a deputy treasurer, period.
Okay, well, do they outsource some of their things? What did you say the name of the, they did not respond to my.
That was Comstock Township in Kalamazoo County.
I'll be happy to reach out to them, but that's one township. And the reason I use these cities is they are comparable by some like the different things that they have actually, so.
Well, just some other comparison that I had here. Texas Township, which is again in Kalamazoo County, population 14,697. They have, the lady there is the deputy treasurer. She is full-time. She's also the assistant assessor. What she explained to me was that the treasurer was a part-time position, but was a board member that had a voting rights. And she basically was part-time and basically oversaw the treasurer's office. They did have a finance director and a finance clerk that my understanding from her was that the finance director oversaw other financing along with such things as grants, was either charged with writing grants, and the finance clerk was involved with working with the clerk's office in terms of the finance. So they actually only had a deputy treasurer that was full-time. It was also the assistant assessor.
Do you have the stats for their accounts payable and if they handle that, or the cash receipting aspect, or how many number of parcels that they take in?
Well, I'm more interested in the population because the number of parcels, you can have more. It's the number of people that you have to deal with. One person could have multiple parcels, which I think is the case here in Oscoda. So I'm more interested in contrasting populations as it relates to Oscoda. And with us at 7,000, there are townships that are twice our size that have basically just a treasurer and a deputy treasurer, and they seem to be operating just fine.
Well, like I said, you didn't provide me with any of the money that if they actually write the checks, the accounts payable aspect of it, or the cash receipting, because there are some that don't do that. They've outsourced those type of things. And I have to disagree with you on the number of parcels because you still have to process that tax bill. And you still have to deal with it if there's splits, combines, order reviews, land banks, different things like that that affect every single parcel that you're dealing with. And I guess I don't know, Bill, have you worked in the treasurer's office?
No,
I know
I have not.
I know. I've asked you several times to come in so we could explain some things to you, but you've never visited.
Well, I was planning to, and then when the Rona hit, that kind of got set to the side.
But I will, what was the Comstock Township you said, and what was the other one? I'll be glad to look into that.
Comstock, Grand Haven, Texas.
Texas Township is where I am right now tonight. And it's in Kalamazoo County,
Yes.
to answer your question.
Yes. Comstock and Texas are both in Kalamazoo County.
Correct.
Jamie, I have a question about the page where it talks about the staff comparisons to other townships. The fourth one on the list, called the City of Dexter, I just don't understand what the abbreviations to the far right means. It says 3 FTE, full-time employees. What's this next one? CalLab/MS. What's that mean?
That was the one that I referenced, is that in some townships, they collaborate with other offices. Like they have 3, that's 3 full-time employees for that one. And then they have a collaborative person. Like, let's say the clerk's office needs help with elections, and you've got a person that, you know, they're waiting for the mail to come in and they got time to go help there, or help the assessor's office, or stuff envelopes, or the zoning office to organize some things, those type of things.
I got it. And then what is the /MS? Is that some I don't know what that means.
I think it's for multiple services, but I'd have to go back and pull it and look.
All right, thanks.
I was just looking on your list here. Oscoda Township has 5,780 parcels. They have 2 24 hours a week employees.
Yep, that's because they have no utility billing customers, and they don't do the accounts payable, and the cash receiving year to date was not included with their stuff.
When does your high season end? And taxes are due. I guess you're starting to get the tax invoices put together now, right? Or maybe they've already printed, and now it's about stuffing and then.
No, not quite printed yet. Actually, we're running behind. So peak seasons are June, July, August, September, and then it slows down a little bit, and then it picks back up again in November, and then goes all the way through February to March 1st. And then usually during those times we are wrapping up tax season with the county, doing the audit, filing things for the end of the year, moving things out to the storage area, attending conferences if there's something available for Jane or myself, so that we still have coverage. Another thing that was a crucial part of having the third person is we're entitled to vacation time, and God forbid anybody gets sick and we have to close the office. And that also puts a damper on some of those, like I said, some of the things with segregation of duties when Jane and I are dealing with taking the money and doing the deposits, especially if one of us is gone all week, there's one person here to do it all. And clearly, clearly by the comparisons, we are at minimum staff with that person. I'm going to give you a little history too that I don't think some of the board members understand. Back when I worked in the treasurer's office part-time, I worked at the counter. I was a 30-hour person, and I helped put the accounts payable in, plus took the payments over the counter. The deputy treasurer was full-time, and like Bill Palmer talked about having a dedicated finance person there, that's what she did. She did the bank reconciliations. The general ledger was in the treasurer's office at that time, even though it was a function of the clerk's office. She did all the general ledger entries, even the ones that like the auditor's adjustments and things like that. We had a dedicated person taking care of all of those things. We had a full-time treasurer at that time, and we also had a part-time person doing the tax rolls, because the tax rolls were a little bit different at that time. Soon after that, the utility billing office got moved into the treasurer's office, and a 30-hour job week was eliminated. Then we gained another whole tax season, a summer and a winter tax bill, with no more people being, no more hours being dedicated to that. And then even with the utility billing person being in this office, they only worked 9 to 4. So the treasurer's employees covered from 8 to 9 and 4 to 5 and their lunch hour. So we were also doing turn on, turn off, scheduling appointments, plus trying to do all the treasurer's office stuff. And then when the utility billing person got moved out of here, that 30-hour position was never replaced, and we were stuck with a seasonal part-time person, and that's it. And that's where we are. So, and back in 2004, when that all happened, the treasurer's office, well, not the treasurer's office, the township we're not doing the general ledger entries for the audit adjustments any longer.
Jamie, can you explain on here the I think I understand what it is, but on your sheet, the admin fees.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yep, what the admin fees are is we charge that on a tax bill, and what that is to help cover is to help to cover the cost of your tax seasons, like printing and publishing and the help that you need, and it also helps for the assessor's office when they do tax tribunals and for their assessment fees. And this year it's projected to be over $100,000.
I was just noticing on here that some of these other townships have much larger admin fees that they collect. We're kind of low on that list.
We are, and you can charge more than 1%. I'd have to look up and see, but you can charge more than 1%. But we went with the 1%.
My thought is that like daily, like with vacations or people being sick or trainings or whatnot, I think it's manageable with 2 people. Sometimes it's hard, you're stretched in with only 1 person in the office. It gets risky, but I'm thinking, the clerk's office is able to operate with 2 people in those scenarios, people taking time off that, they've accrued, or sicknesses or trainings and whatnot. Sometimes you have to work through lunch or whatever. And I think the clerk's office had a cut in, I don't know this, I don't have as long a history with the township, but I think there was a part-time person in the clerk's office at one point. So there would have been 3, not full-time, but 3 people. The one thing that stands out to me in the treasurer's office, or that's my concern, is I can't recall off the top of my head the amount of taxes that get taken in a season. So over a relatively short period of time, $8 million or so. My concern is that we, the township, are able to do that well. So during that peak in tax time is what I really would be concerned about, is the cost of a part-time seasonal person worth ensuring we can collect the tax as well. But day to day throughout the year, I think it's manageable. don't know if that makes sense or if I conveyed my thoughts well, but that's where I'm coming from.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think that we've tried to accommodate that as much as possible. The only thing with doing with a seasonal part-time position, it turns over and it turns over a lot, but that's, you know, that's what happens in those type of things. So other people want full-time positions. Sometimes you're lucky to keep a person for a long time. I had a few people, one of them was my letter writer, and she stayed for a long time because it worked good for her and her family.
I know in the past, Jamie, you've mentioned problems you need help with, like envelope stuffing at tax time and those kinds of things. Have you looked into, you know, automating that, getting a piece of equipment that would help your office and in those kinds of things that would take time away, or approaching other counties that do that? I was told that Alcona County would stuff our envelopes for a modest fee of just, you know, a couple of $100. Have you looked into that at all?
I do have Iosco News Herald stuffs our envelopes, or they fold our envelopes for us, and then we just stuff them ourselves. And to be honest, the stuffing part, if you have enough people doing it, it isn't a time-consuming part. What we do though, just for your knowledge also, is with those 9,000 tax bills that we print, we go through and we pick out anybody that has more than one property to save on postage, because there's quite a few of them. And then we send the remainder down to be folded, and then we stuff those individually. We did have our own folder machine for a very long time, but it was eating more of the ones and we'd have to reprint them more than, it was hurting more than helping. But with today's technology, I guess that's something to look into. I guess we were always trying to save the township money wherever we could, and this seemed to work out pretty well for us in the past. I don't expect you to make a decision or do whatever. What I wanted to do is get this information out to you. So moving forward, we can do what's in the best interest of the township for the treasurer's office overall.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Jamie, for sure. But I think if we don't hit it now, then you're out another couple of weeks or more until the next board meeting. So this is your peak season already, right?
Oh, yes.
So I mean, here it is. We're in we're in June 22nd. And so we're already into June. So I guess, how about, so I'll just throw this out, see what people think. So I'll make a motion that the treasurer's office hire one seasonal part-time employee up to 350 hours, starting, I guess, as soon as you can get someone identified.
How many hours did you say?
350. So it's basically a little more than 330, because you've got, that's really 3 months, but she's got another week here and basically just pushing it into giving her time. So she's got the window covered.
So is this just on a year? Is this on a yearly basis, 350 hours, or just to finish this season?
I'm just looking at it right now because I mean, to your point, I think there's more to be discussed, but you have an urgent need now, so I'm trying to help you, like I did the last time you needed help.
Yep.
So you're capping at 350 hours.
Yeah, it's just a thought on that. Just, I mean, because I'm thinking 6 months isn't I mean, that goes well beyond the peak season. So I'm just trying to help her with her peak season, and that's what it kind of feels like. I mean, 375 would, I guess, might be enough.
No,
but
I'm just
I don't know,
trying
I
to.
looked at 350 is kind of like a. Yeah.
I'm just trying to gauge
Okay, man.
what the 350
Yeah.
hours means. That's all. As
Well,
far as
yeah, just hours.
just 350 work hours, and then it terminates at that point.
Well, yeah, because 6 months is 660 hours. So that's what I was doing, is giving her 3 months plus. That's really the concept, I guess, right?
Okay. Okay, there's a motion. Is there support?
I'll support that.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Baier. Roll call.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yeah.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes, I have a question though after we're done.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
No.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion has passed.
My question is, if Clarence Yax is available to come back or still wants to, can I just rehire him and bring him back? Or do I need to go through the whole hiring process again, which would pretty much be about 2 more weeks till the next board meeting? So,
The
all right.
hiring process should be worked through the superintendent, since all employees are under the purview of the superintendent.
So then so the next board meeting wouldn't be for 3 more weeks?
I think the superintendent can allow that hiring to be earlier. So Mr. Cummings has approved seasonal, or made the motion for seasonal employee for 350 hours. So that process can start immediately.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, request for blood drive on 29 June.
Right, so your packet contains a letter from Iris Lawrence associated with a request to hold a blood drive at the Awney Medical Center next Monday, the 29th of June, 2020. This request will sound familiar, as Ms. Lawrence supplied a similar request that the board approved in January of 2020. As supplied last time by Versity, they will provide the township with an insurance certificate naming the township as an additional insured party.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we go ahead with or honor the blood drive request for the 29th of June. And that's going to be at the Awney building? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. That's my motion.
I'll support.
Motion by Mr. Baier, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Requesting for an amount for the North American Space Summit for the 30th of August.
All right, so the North American Space Summit will be held in Traverse City Sunday, August 30th through Wednesday, September 2nd. The township and the airport will share the cost of a trade booth, but the requested amount of $8,000 covers the shared costs of the trade booth, conference registrations, hotel rooms for 3 nights, mileage, and marketing material associated with the trade booth. As previously discussed, Oscoda will be prominently featured as a selected site for horizontal launch of the Michigan Aerospace Manufacturers Association. And the purpose of this is to market both the township and the airport development opportunities, make connections with potential companies that will want to operate in our township, as well as potential people looking to invest in our community.
Comments?
Dave, who's going to be representing Oscoda? Todd and you, or Aaron, or who?
Yeah, so right now, be Todd, myself, Ryan Mattis is going to be working the booth as well. He's the CDAM fellow. And we would have hopefully representation from the Economic Improvement Committee. The airport manager will be attending on the airport side, as well as he's going to be asking his board. Last year, he had 2 representatives from the board that were that traveled to the Space Summit in Traverse City last year.
Well, I feel that since we've been selected for the, the site for Michigan, that we need to continue to pursue this. And I think, that requires us to spend some money to promote ourselves at Traverse City. I think that could be a very good investment.
Mr. Baier, are you okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm hearing some noise, so we got concerned.
Nope, I'm fine. I'm here.
So, any other comments regarding the summit, Space Summit? All right, is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve an amount not to exceed $8,000 for expenses for the North American Space Summit, August 30th through September 2nd of 2020.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gayeski. Roll call.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gayeski,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed,
Who was snoring? Martin?
Yes. Motion's passed. Okay, still getting a lot of interference here. I see. All right. Okay, next, determine fireworks for the 4th of July.
All right, so this was discussed as a project update at the last Township Board meeting on the 8th of June. And your packet contains an email from the Oscoda Township Superintendent. And what it states is that at the regular board meeting for June 15th, the Oscoda Township Board discussed the question of contributing to the fireworks. The consensus was that Oscoda Township would pay the same percentage that they have in the past years. The board encourages the public to continue practicing social distancing during the event in an attempt to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So I know that was one of the concerns from board members last time, was to determine if there would be a financial contribution from Oscoda, and the answer is yes. If it is held by the Township Board, then they would contribute the same 1/3 percentage. Obviously, based on our previous discussion, the options associated with the fireworks would be to postpone the fireworks to a later date, postpone the fireworks until 2021, or move forward with the firework display and post signs to encourage social distancing. So the fireworks vendor has been very gracious as far as allowing us this much time to make that final determination. I have confirmed that the plans have not changed for Harrisville or for the Towhouses, that they plan to cancel the parades associated with the 4th of July and hold the fireworks shows.
Comments?
I think we should go ahead with the fireworks show. People have been locked up long enough to post signs for social distancing.
I agree.
I think they're looking forward to something.
Agree. Tawas and Harrisville are both still having their shows, and your social distancing, usually you're hanging out with your family that you've already been hanging out with anyways. And it should be used common sense that if you don't feel good, you shouldn't be coming out in public.
Maybe a bit of a technicality here, but I'm curious, how do we execute the signage? What kind of signs would we put out?
To practice social distancing and remain 6 feet apart.
Right. Now I'm saying with what? I mean, we're not going to print it on 8.5 by 11 paper and staple it to telephone poles along with the lost cat and dog signs. I mean, how are we going to communicate it? Like, you know,
90%
not the
of them
wording,
can
but
do.
the method.
Tim, every one I seen is on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper.
And it's
Put
put
it off
where?
the computer.
So it's just put on the telephone poles and.
Yeah,
you know.
they're all, they just glue them on. I glue them on my windows.
Well, that's fine, but we're talking about going down to where the fireworks are. So, I mean, there aren't a ton of telephone poles down at the beach. So how are we going to communicate this? That's the question I'm asking.
I make a motion.
We do have a lighted sign out at the DPW that you can program that thing for verbiage, and it blinks off and on.
Yes.
I make a
use it for the
put it on the corner of Lake Street and River Road.
I make a motion that we go forward with the 4th of July fireworks with signage to be created that is determined appropriate from coordination of the DPW and police department and superintendent.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. The Oscoda Township request to reduce sewer charges due to a rain event. Doug Moen is on the line. I will unmute him. So go ahead, Mr. Schaefer.
All right, so your packet contains a request to have a reduction of the gallons charged due to a rain event. And so what this shows is the letter dated the 11th of June, 2020, and it is the request of the Charter Township of Oscoda. We have the Charter Township of Oscoda. We have a letter from the superintendent requesting to reduce the charge for sewer service by 900,000 gallons for the billing month end of May 2020. Supervisor Weed, myself, we have had conversations with Oscoda Township regarding this request. The Township Superintendent also requested that instead of charging the Oscoda Township sewer rate, another option to be presented to the board would be to charge the Oscoda rate of $4.03 per 1,000 gallons instead of $9.49 per 1,000 gallons. And I had the utility billing clerk provide a mock bill. And so on that mock bill, page 191 of your packet, and in there it shows the difference of it would basically reduce the bill from $18,049.98 to $13,125.06. So wanted to be able to present that to the township board as far as the options available with this request from Oscoda Township.
Now, regarding infiltration of the system, because when you have a large rain event and you have water that goes into the rainwater that goes into your sewer system, your sanitary sewer system, that is considered infiltration. And stopping infiltration to the maximum extent possible has been a utility function for decades. And there are a lot of methods to be able to reduce that, because with all of that rainwater coming into the system, it still has to be transported. It still has to be processed. It still affects what we are doing with our permit. Doug, can you explain further on that?
Yeah, you're actually correct on that. And furthermore, when you have an excessive infiltration, it can bring a lot of grit with it. And that's extremely harsh on pumps as well. We still got to treat it. You still got to pay the electrical, the wear and tear on the flutes, the impellers, the transmission mains. And that was partially why we're out of compliance with Oscoda permit, because of their infiltration.
I did speak with Oscoda about this, and they did say they're working on some methods to reduce infiltration. I'm in favor of going with the reduced rate on this bill, but I'm not in favor of anything lower than that because of the work and costs that that puts onto our system.
Well, you guys can work it however you want. I'm good with whatever you decide. But it's like me going to a gas station, having a hole in my gas tank, going, can I get a reduced rate because I have an issue? I don't know how else to put it. So we still have to deal with it.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree with you on that. But as long as the Oscoda is working on to eliminate their infiltration. Now, if they're not going to work on it, then that's a different issue.
No, that's a work in progress, and documentation supporting that.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I was just curious, Dave, do you have an idea what their normal bill is for Oscoda? Just an average amount that they normally would pay?
See here.
Well, he's looking that up, Doug. How much did we have in Oscoda?
Pardon?
How much infiltration do we have in Oscoda over this rain? Oscoda had a lot. We should have a lot because we're a lot bigger.
Well, I'm really not sure. I'm not sure how many gallons that Asabo put into ours. We could do the math if we knew exactly how much. I could probably figure that out for you. But we're over 900,000 gallons, lift station 25, and we're right around 300,000 to 400,000. That was for one day. Then it went down to 700,000. The next day, 700,000. But it adds up really quick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing about it is I kept on adjusting the lagoons as far as, you know, letting it raise and raise, because sometimes what we can do is buffer a big rain event and then still be in compliance with our discharge under 625,000 gallons a day. And it got to a point where I was within like 1/8 of an inch from going above and beyond. It's like, can't do it. And that's when we had the overflow, because had to bring it back down, because if we had another rain event, it would have been ugly. So, you know, we monitored it pretty darn close, and, you know, just some things tip it over the edge.
Yeah.
Hey, Doug, does Oscoda seal its manhole covers? We talked about that being a point of. Does Oscoda seal its manhole covers? It's this point of infiltration. So, I mean, do we do that?
In low areas where it's prone to flood, there should be.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of areas that are like that. You know, as far as
I'm asking,
a foot, 2 foot of water.
But Doug, I'm asking, do we seal the manhole covers?
No.
Okay.
There might be some out there that frames their lids, because the only way you can seal them is get a actual frame and lid that you bolt down. It's got an O-ring gasket on it. And those are stuff like that where it's prone to have, you know, inches, if not feet, over the cover itself.
So it's fair to say we've got a good chunk of infiltration, certainly in our own system, from ourselves. It's because we don't have seals.
Well, in my opinion, I don't think it's from the sealed lids. A lot of it, which we're going to be sending out letters, is infiltration from sump pumps. In my belief, there's a lot of sumps that are connected to the sewer system, and that's what is overloading it as well.
Residential sumps?
Pardon?
Residential sumps?
Yes.
Oh.
In fact, we just put that on a couple weeks ago. We put that on the when we're allowed to go back into residence. That's one of the inspections we're going to be doing, is checking for sumps that are illegally connected into the sanitary system.
Great. Thank you for that.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
Well, Dave, if you're not able to find that, I was just curious, you know, what their normal billing is, to get an idea of how much more. But I think to Aaron's point, you know, there was a lot of water came through and ends up coming through our system, and our pumps were working hard during that rain event, and so that puts additional wear and tear on our entire system. And I know it's a tough position for Asabo to be in, but you know, it's a tough position for us. We're talking about upgrades to our sewer system and money that we've got to spend, and when we have these kind of events, and it puts a strain on our, you know, the whole system and the pumps and everything to pump that additional water. And like Doug was saying, it was in 1/8 of an inch of going over the lagoon there for over our permit. You know, it's a big problem for us as well. So,
Bill, I'm looking at this. You know, I'm just going to throw numbers at you since the beginning of the year. Okay, 9,500, 11 grand, 12 grand, $8 grand, $9 grand, $8 grand. So,
Okay.
you know, there's a range, I guess, from 8 to 12,000, and this month is 18,000.
So under that, guys, I don't think the 13,125.96 is unreasonable, because in fact, maybe it should be a little more than that, but I don't think that's unreasonable given the you know, the additional wear and tear on our system from all that water coming in. Just my thought, anyway.
I make a motion that we allow this one-time reduction in rate for a Sobel at $13,125.06 for the looking for a date here
Support.
for okay, yeah, for this current bill that's in our packet. Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Request for the CVB for movies at the pier.
All right, so your packet contains a letter from the CVB, and it is dated 15th of June. What they're requesting is on Wednesdays, beginning July 1st through Wednesday, August 26th, they intend to set up at 8 p.m. games and activities for the kids. And then they are also requesting that the makeup days be for Friday nights, except for the last day. If it rains, they'd like to have the Saturday, August 29th. So that's all detailed in there from the CVB.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the movies at the pier for the season.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Mcguire, support by Mr. Baier. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Electronic vehicle charging station.
All right, so what you have in your packet, it was a placeholder item. I didn't get the agreement till this afternoon because I requested quite a few revisions. And those revisions were all incorporated as requested into the agreement. And so what this agreement allows is basically Hague Automotive to act as an owner-operator of the electronic vehicle charging station. So this is a newer concept. When I had put this concept together before, basically it would require that the township to purchase the electronic vehicle charging station, pay for the installation and the ongoing maintenance of the charging station, as well as pay the monthly electric bill, the utility bill. And the demand for electric vehicle charging stations has grown since January and February when I've been working on this. And Hague Automotive came on site. They met me at Township Hall. We went over to the municipal parking lot that is adjacent to the office on Dwight Street. The lot is just east of the office, and we look for proposed sites. And basically, what you'll notice on the map that is in there, it shows basically that there's a consumer's energy pole that is already in that lot, and so they would just retrofit that pole to be able to provide a service down to the electronic vehicle station. And the electronic vehicle station would have 2 ports, and there would be 2 parking spots that are dedicated to the electric vehicle charging station. And Hague Automotive would be allowed to be the owner operator. They would purchase the charging station, they would install it, they would maintain it, they would pay the monthly utility bill. And in return for providing that service, and in return for, being able to use the township-owned parking facility, we would be reimbursed by Hague Automotive 1 cent per vehicle hour charged, and per kilowatt hour charged. And so they would reimburse us on a monthly basis for doing that. But it would be an amenity for the residents or the people traveling from downstate up here in electric vehicles to be able to charge their vehicle, and we would not pay for that electricity. Hague Automotive would. And so what you can see in the string of emails is basically they cleaned up, they removed all the language associated with indemnification. They changed the insurance requirements. They put my information in there, as well as changed the governing law to Iosco County. Exhibit A was added to show the map of where that is. And overall, the concept would be, this would be an attractive place for people to come, charge their vehicles, and while the vehicles are charging, be able to patronize the businesses that are within walking distance on Dwight Street there. So
Comments?
this agreement obviously would have to be executed, and what I'm asking for is that the board approve the supervisor to execute this contract.
Anybody have anything?
How many companies provide this type of service?
None like this. So Consumers Energy was offering a $7,000 rebate. And that $7,000 rebate, the township was still going to be on the hook for a portion of the purchase and installation. As far as owner operating, that's obviously the ideal scenario for the municipality. That's what I was trying to research. And basically, this is kind of very new for Hague Automotive. They've only rolled this out in the last month or two, that they are basically the owner operator, and that is the agreement. And when the representative came on site here, we met with the treasurer to be able to go over, okay, this is how you set up the utility bill, and this is how you monitor, and it's just another thing that you have to be able to pay and monitor, whereas with this type of agreement, that's all on them. And so that is obviously more desirable for the municipalities, and it's a new concept. The only other company that was really taking advantage of the consumer rebates was called Solar Home, and Power Home Solar. And I did obtain a quote. It was quite a bit more than what the Hague Automotive was being able to offer. And so with this new concept, as far as the owner operator, it's almost like a lease. And as stated in there, we do not pay for any ongoing maintenance or operations of it. .
Would there have to be, Dave, would there have to be a restriction on a couple of parking spaces there for only electric vehicles or something to that extent?
Yeah, and so there would be signage, and as you can see on the very last page, that's what they're asking to be able to put at those spots. So on the very last page, Exhibit B is the signage that says electric vehicle charging. So in each one of those spots, they would put signage there.
And did they say anything about the means they were going to have for like advertising? This is kind of off, out of the way a little bit. How would people know about this? How would they advertise this and get?
Yeah, so there's several very popular apps for people that own electric vehicles, and those apps are on their smartphones. So when they're driving their electric vehicle, it maps how far it is away, and so they would be able to bring that up on their apps to be able to see the closest electric vehicle charging station. If you look at Tawas City, they do have one, and that's that would be the closest one.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve the parking lot as designated for Hague Automotive for electric vehicle charging.
Support.
I would.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Resignation of Elizabeth Swales from the Board of Review. I received a phone call a few months ago that she was resigning from the board. I have requested a letter for that, but I have not heard anything back and have not been able to get in contact since that time. Does anybody have any comments about that?
And I think you mentioned, Aaron, that earlier that the appointment to the Board of Review would fill this position. This isn't an additional opening, is it?
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
All right, I make a motion that we approve resignation of Elizabeth Swales from the Board of Review.
Support.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes. And thank you, Elizabeth Swales, for your service to the community. The row component of the USDA distribution.
All right, so what I had sent to the board is a compilation. There are 3 row invoices totaling $38,062. This would be combined with pay application number 1 and 2 to Elmer's, and to be included in the distribution by the for the USDA. Now, board members will note that the USDA will only approve 1 distribution per month, meaning that this would be the distribution for June, and then in July, if everything wraps up with the project for phase 2 as projected, then there will be another distribution in front of the board for approval in July. But this addition is to approve the 3 row invoices totaling $38,062.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we include the $38,062 from the row invoice into the USDA RD distribution.
Support. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Baier,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. Mcguire,
Yes.
Mr. Gorsky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, we're now into the public comment section of our meeting. For this, there's a 4-minute time limit. Please introduce yourself when you start talking. If you are on this meeting by internet, please use the raise hand function to let me know that you have a public comment, or you can type your comments into the chat box. I'm going to unmute those who are on the phone. So anybody who's on the phone, do you have any public comments?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Brian Haley here in Oscoda, a longtime resident. I have been looking at your vacant building registration law. Now, this law was derived or put together mainly out of Baltimore and other industrial cities to control beyond blighted, hulking buildings. Because actually, if you allow them to stay, they actually transform the whole neighborhoods to the detriment thereof. Now, in Oscoda, I'd like to talk about non-blighted, lawful buildings. I think that's a fair assessment. Now, when you look to state law or federal law, you won't find any such law. So indeed, I believe that when you write this law, it's actually against the law, if that's proper language. Because you're going up against the Fourth Amendment, because actually this is private property. So when you start saying someone has to do something, sign up for something, and you might be fined, I don't see how that stands. And you guys are sworn in to uphold the state and the United States Constitution. So that is my main point on this. When I asked for legal advice, what legal advice did the Planning Commission receive or your board? I was denied a FOIA request. So I'm just going to put that out there. I think you're going to run into a lot of trouble. I'm talking about, I understand the intent. I get all of that. But really, you're going circular here, whereas we need more people. So if we start doing this to people, number one, it's not right, but you have no standing in law. Now, Weed brought up Saginaw. Saginaw has something similar, I see, and they're also in court over that. They're in court over that right now. So I think you might want to take a longer look, put out the legal advice that you did receive, which is, it's kind of strange because we're talking about the Constitution, state in the United States. I'm asking for what legal advice you received, and you're putting up a blocker on attorney-client privilege about what? The Constitution? Now, Weed, you were in the service. We took an oath. You've taken another oath here, and that is to uphold the Constitution. And furthermore, now that you're a township official, you are to uphold the state constitution, not just the United States. Second point, at the last meeting. Now, Mr. Weed obviously wants Ms. Mcguire's seat, wants her job. He has a legal right to do that. But what we see, and Baier commented on it, political, I've never seen anything like it, but what alarms me is now we have a paid professional named Mr. Schaefer. Now, was he involved in this so-called investigation? I mean, a lot of this really to a citizen, and we're you hear about it. You don't have to ask about it. You hear about it out here. It's beyond contrived. I mean, you have a motive for this. We've never treated each other like this. So those are my comments. You can deal with them what you will. I think you should at least put out to the public that the law that you've written actually comports with the United States Constitution and, of course, the state of Michigan's Constitution. Now, the zoning administrator went back and forth. First, he told me he had legal advice on this, and then he saw where this was going, and then he backtracked and said he didn't have legal advice. So me as a citizen who've been here a long time, totally confused, and I really wish you'd review it. You're going to move ahead and do what you want to do. Weed's assertive. We get that. You're going to do what you want to do, but you're going to end up in court. So when you do end up in court, similar, I do believe that the board members that voted for this, and again, I'm not talking about blighted units.
Thank you, Mr. Haley.
That's a
The
different
4
category.
minutes has ended.
All right.
All right. Does anybody else on the phone have any public comments? All right. Anybody who's on the internet? Any public comments? Okay, not seeing any hands raised. We do have a couple of things that were put in the chat. Where Art Cruz asked, is Oak Street scheduled for 2020? I'm assuming that means for the Waterline project. Mark Miller talked about public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Art Cruz again asked why the need to appropriate the increase doesn't appear to be a need. Kathy Woosterbar said public comment should be placed at the beginning and end of meetings according to past practice. And Kathy Woosterbarth also asked, will Ryan working the booth have to pay the $600 registration fee? I will also add in here that the board received today a letter from Richard Miller regarding the section line road that had been vacated. So the board can review over that information that he provided. Now we'll go into board comments. Does any board members have anything?
I have a couple of items, Aaron. Jim here. My first meeting, the 911 board, was very interesting and enjoyable. One thing that they discussed that could end up being controversial a little bit, I don't think Dave mentioned it earlier in the meeting, but they are talking about the central dispatch leader. I believe his name is Mike. Is that right?
Mike Eller, yes.
Yes, okay. There was kind of a heated discussion about who should run the towing in the case of an accident, who should facilitate that and let the people involved know how it works, the rotation, all of that. He made a strong case that he should not be part of that. He talked to us about how much of his time that took, various controversies and arguments and so forth. And he was suggesting that the police investigating the accident are the better people to handle that. And I'm talking about the rotation of various people that are in the towing business. One problem there at that meeting, there are, 3, 4 police agencies, the state police and Oscoda Township and the Tawas Police Authority and the Sheriff's Department. Only the state police were at this meeting, and since they have a huge role in this suggestion, I don't recall they made a final determination. Dave, am I right in that?
Correct.
I think it was just talked about, yes. So anyway, I thought the board might be interested in that. And the second thing is tonight's meeting. I guess I was a total failure last time, 2 weeks ago, trying to get people that have questions, particularly of the clerk and treasurer, particularly the treasurer, questions that involve a lot of documentation, a lot of research to come up with an answer. And I literally pleaded with people 2 weeks ago, why don't you go in there, give Jamie or John a call and say, hey, I'd like to talk about this or that, you know, and go in on a Friday or a Wednesday or something instead of these two little Monday night deals. I guess nobody's taken a shot at that. And I really don't know how you can get a good answer. A little discussion on a Monday night without the treasurer being able to, you know, research the answer and so forth. And it grieves me to have to do this, but I just don't see any reason for this other than what we talked about 2 weeks ago. Ambush, surprise. And I don't think that's the way to operate. I think, you know, if you're really sincerely interested in these questions, and some of the questions were very good, some time on it. So that's all.
I have a comment, just kind of in response to that, just to point out that Mr. Weed and I were able to sit down today.
Good.
So hopefully it's beneficial for my part in it, and I hope I wasn't 3 years too late in it for, you know, again, I'd say that to my participation in it. Hopefully it leads to good things. I appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That's all from me.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything?
I do. I just wanted to make a few comments in regards to the last meeting. To date, I still have not received a copy of Weed's personal audit document. John, were you able to get a copy of that?
I was.
When did you receive that?
Monday night of June 8th, right after the board meeting.
Okay, because I still haven't gotten it to date. So today or tonight, I'm only going to address the audit adjustment remarks because of the amount and the allegations. The dollar amount of the entries Weed is referencing includes several adjustments made only at year end, preparation of the financial statements. What Weed neglects to say is they are not mistakes made during the year, but adjustments made to bring the Township's financial records to full accrual at year end. What was not brought to light is that in 2004, the Township decided it was more cost effective to contract with the auditor to perform these entries rather than to hire a CPA or a finance department. The Michigan Department of Treasury has accepted this as a solution for governments in Michigan. In fact, when the audit is submitted to this Department of Treasury, they ask if there are any other findings rather than financial statement preparation controls, because they recognize it is not cost effective for all governments to have a CPA or finance department. Weed fails to also mention many of these entries include recordings of capital asset activities and other accruals. The numbers in 2019 are particularly high as the auditors assisted with required entries to close out the community center fund to the amount of almost $1.9 million alone, which was highlighted and covered during the actual audit. Weed's reckless comments could jeopardize our bond ratings, causing increased interest rates for the many, many projects that we have coming in the near future. Clearly, Weed either does not understand the audit process, or this was a dirty political attack using the same tactics we have seen in the past.
Okay, anybody else got anything?
Yeah, I have a comment I'd like to talk about a little bit. I received, I think, all the board members, with the exception of Mr. Baier, who unfortunately doesn't get emails, from an individual calling Mr. Weed's comments at our last meeting a character assassination, and on Miss Mcguire. There certainly was no attack on her character. In fact, I think Mr. Weed mentioned several times that there were no instances of fraud. This was merely an assessment of job performance. And under the Charter Township Act 359 in 1947 and the Michigan Constitution, the supervisor of a township is designated as the chief executive officer of the township, and his responsibility is to oversee all operations of the township. So when he sees a problem in any given area, it's his responsibility to bring that to the board and bring that to light. And I think that's exactly what he did at the last meeting. These are problems that I see in trying to determine a budget when things aren't recorded properly, and there's huge amounts of time in between when there's reconciliations and things are paid and not reconciled for months and months, and it creates a real problem. This email goes on then to attack Mr. Weed's character based on his rank as in the military after serving our country for 20 years. And this is a person that's supporting Miss Mcguire, which he's certainly entitled to do, and asking everyone to support her, and claiming character assassination on her, when in fact he's doing a character assassination on Mr. Weed based on his rank when he left the military after some 20 years of service. So my comment would be to anybody that's listening to this, if you served in the military, I want to thank you for your service, regardless of whatever rank you may have attained. And Mr. Weed, thank you for your service. And I think this is a horrible thing to accuse somebody of. I think this is an abomination. So that's my comment. Thank you.
I would just like to say I think character assassinations have no business here. Similar to what Mr. Palmer is saying, I don't think we should all try to avoid that. It's upsetting, certainly.
Any other comments?
Jamie, I have a question. You mentioned the point about a bond rating for the township. I'm just curious. I mean, I'm not an expert in that particular venue, but I just didn't think we ever had one.
You don't think we have a bond rating?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we don't have. Why would we have a bond rating?
We've gone out
We're
for
not
bonds.
applying for one right now. Yeah, but that doesn't mean we have one.
Tim, I will get with you after the meeting.
I don't think this township's ever been rated.
Okay.
Any other comments? All right, so I agree with you, Mr. Baier, on the 911 board meeting about who should run towing, that it should not be 911 managing that. Were there other alternatives brought up regarding that? Mr. Baier, are you still there?
We may have finally lost him.
May have. I don't see his. Let me check and make sure here in his phone number. Yeah, I don't see his phone number there anymore. Okay. So I guess since it was brought up again, I would like to say regarding ambush and surprise, those terms used, I know that none of what I brought forward was a surprise or an ambush to those involved. It was information that was already known. My job is as an elected official of a township, is to hold the best interests of the township and to follow municipal law according to Michigan, because under Michigan law, the township is created by the state and therefore, as a product of the state, must do what the state says. And in doing that, I have tried numerous attempts at trying to get things corrected. I have met resistance along the way. And I know that many of the discrepancies in our audit report were items that were not recorded properly. And the word transparency has been thrown around quite a bit. So I don't see what the problem is with the transparency of what's happened with this. I'm not going to, I think people very well know that I am not going to lie or sugarcoat things or try and make them seem much prettier than what they really are. The reality is reality, and I will convey it as such. So in relation to that, I would like to bring out that there was a grant that we received, information that I had just recently been able to derive. We received a grant in January, the amount of $25,800. And it shows in here that amount was entered into the BS&A system by the treasurer as an expense rather than a revenue, and that it's also been double booked in that regard. So now we are showing I think it's $51,000 in expenses instead of the $25,800 in revenue. So there's just a lot of wrong entries being put in, and it is definitely creating havoc on the budget. And since the budget falls under the purview of the superintendent and the supervisor, that makes it very difficult for that side of the job to get done properly, because we have no idea with improper booking of items where we're at really with our funds. Yeah, are we overspending or are we not? And so whether it hurts our bond rating or not, I think it's more important that corrections get made rather than try to make it seem like something is different than what it really is. And if people have a problem with me revealing what the reality is, because people want to know what's going on in the township, they're always like, why are you doing this? What's up with that? And I don't know. I think some people are not liking hearing the truth, but that's where I'm at with that. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thanks for joining.